There's a lot that can be said about the offerings that the N64 provided in the world of fighting games. Or maybe not, because there's not a lot of them to begin with. And if some of you were to narrow it down further, very few games are actually good. So if the question about the best fighter game on the console will come up, most move brains will probably default to the original Super Smash Bros. And that's fine, it's one of the most popular fighting games on the console. And some will say it's not a fighting game, but it doesn't matter in the long run. But fine, let's remove it from play and change up the question a bit. So, what is the best traditional fighting game on the console? If I were to hazard a guess, it would be between Killer Instinct Gold, Mortal Kombat 4, or WWF No Mercy. Or you can slide in any of those other great Aki Engine wrestling games, and that's even if you count wrestling games as fighting games. We do. Well, whatever your answer is, I doubt today's game even crossed your mind unless you're incredibly base. A game we think should hold the title of the best N64 fighting game, at least for now. This is Team Crossbody, this is Fighter Destiny's Runback. Known outside the US as Fighting Cup, and supposedly to go under the name Struggle Hard, which makes sense because this game is all about manhood, Fighter's Destiny was co-developed by Genki, a company that was founded in 1999 by two former Sega employees, Hiroshi Yakagami and Tomoto Komura. Opus Studio, a company that was founded in 1990 as well, best known for their music production and sound design, and Anchor Incorporated, which opened its doors in 1996, founded by brothers Masahiro and Kinochi Onoguchi. A whole lot of non-American names in this one, Jesus fucking Christ. Anyway, these two are special for working on various 3D fighters such as Tekken, Soul Edge, and Fighting Vipers as motion designers, and their company specializes in mocapping for fighting games and realistic wrestling games, with two of them being those strange Xbox exclusive WWF Raw games that popped up in the early 2000s. As for Fighter's Destiny itself, it was released in 1998 in North America and reviewed mid to positively. Critics praising the game for being the first genuine fighting game for the Nintendo 64, and the game's unique point system making it a standout, while bashing its subpar graphics, equally lackluster character designs, and strangely only having 2 attack buttons. The game was followed up by 2000's Fighter's Destiny 2. In between those two games, a spiritual successor was made only for arcades in 1999 by the name of Toy Fighter. I didn't know going in how much Fighter's Destiny had in common with wrestling games, which would totally explain the feel of the game. Or that could really be the game's dog shit frame rate. We'll decide that when we get to the gameplay section. For now, let's get into presentation. Once in the lifetime of every man, they are challenged. With no explanation or warning, they must be willing to defend it at a moment's notice, unless they run the risk of losing it forever. When this time arises, the cube of manhood will beckon, drawing opponents to one of its many, but sealed off in hidden locations. Only those who have entered this cube must prove their manhood to be aware of its existence. Women, with the ability to channel this hidden energy of manhood, must prove themselves on this dangerous cube. For manhood for them comes at a time of high responsibility or great challenge. It isn't clear what truly happens to the victors and the defeated. Only the cube knows. And maybe that's best for the world. This literally took me like 3 to 5 minutes to come out with. And yeah, it's stupid, but it took a hell of a lot more effort than the guys who made the game did. It's like, they called the game Fighting Club in Japan and was like, yeah, tournament. That'll explain it. Sure, I guess. But it's called Fighter Destiny over here. So where's my fucking destiny? I mean, there's some stuff going on. Like how Valerie being the secret child of the organizer of the tournament, and she wants to prove that she could be a legitimate successor, or Abdul wanting to buy his fucking cow back. Who the hell is getting attached to these stories? I'll say it once, and I'll say it again. Story matters in fighting games. I'm not saying it has to be complex, but having a story can help ground the world for your characters and can sometimes assist with character designs, something Fighters Destiny has a massive problem with. I'm convinced they just looked at Virtua Fighter's roster and someone said, just copy that. Then some smart guy countered, we'll get caught. And then some guy said, quickly, we'll just copy some weirdos from 1990s Google. So now we have knockoff characters with a bunch of weirdos around them. We have Ryu, of course based off crappy Street Fighter 1. We have Mohiro from Breakers. He's just Wolf Hawkfield. She's Pi. He's Kage. They just named him Ninja. Hi Ivy or Christy, I couldn't decide. This is Jeffrey. Our TJ combo, name a black guy. Well, I'm not sure, but I'm watching you. And Clown. The graphics themselves are similar to Virtua Fighter 2. They are actually a lot simpler and fuzzier due to the Nintendo 64's hardware, and while I wouldn't call the game good looking, it isn't crazy ugly either. Same with the stages. While very bland, I wouldn't call anything I saw here particularly puke-inducing or anything. You gotta remember, this was 1998, and people had to know that N64 was a bit touched in the head when it came to graphics in most cases. Besides, how else were you going to do these stages? They had to stand on a cube, which obviously changes from map to map, which is a nice touch. This might be a really hot take here, but I feel like the music in Fighters Destiny is very good, and it's the only thing keeping the spiceless presentation of the game from being complete ass. They're designed behind the nationalities of each roster member, other than being about the characters themselves, except Bob. He's from Brazil, but his stage is a desert, so that might be more of a character-based choice since he's a former military soldier. It feels very much like Street Fighter 2 in this regard, and it could have made some excellent material for remixing if the series took off. So yeah, they're a little generic in nature, but it's a solid jumping off point for the first entry.
Keep going! Keep going! Come on! Wow! Boom!
The main single-player hook to Fighters Destiny is playing through its various game modes to unlock characters and additional moves for each of its fighters. Each roster member has 10 skills they can unlock, but skills are not unlocked by single means. Let me explain. Clearing vs. Combo gives your character 1 skill. 8 more skills can be earned through Master Challenge along with unlocking the Master himself. 1 more skill can be earned by beating another player in the win or lose versus mode. Although I'd love to unlock these extra moves, as I'm sure to help round out each of these characters' movesets, it's a bit of a grind, and we will use that time better learning the game. So playing the weaker and or gimped version of the cast will have to do. Let's get into the game modes available. Versus Com is the game's arcade ladder mode. Fight through 10 stages with the final boss Burrow being unlockable once completing it. Versus Battle is the standard 2-player versus mode that includes an extra game mode in win or lose, when players play a match while betting each other's extra moves, with the winner gaining 1 and the loser having 1 removed. As said before, while unlocking moves isn't hard, it's time consuming, so we obviously didn't play this mode. Record Attack includes several modes of play. Survival, fight in 101 point matches, fastest, win the first of 4 matches while making sure to earn points as fast as possible, under 1 minute to be exact, and Rodeo, an endurance match against the fighting cow, Ushi. Master Challenge. This mode will have you challenge only 2 opponents, the Master and Joker, which are chosen randomly. Defeating the Master will earn you a skill, but losing to the Joker will take away any skills earned up to that point. which I guess makes this a little bit of a roguelike. The master increases in difficulty the further you get, which makes sense, but the Joker is an asshole the first time you encounter him and never stops being an asshole. It isn't too bad. You're free to bail out with the skills you manage to gain, but I don't know, this mode is way too stressful for me. Training is exactly what it means. Although this mode is fairly robust for a 1998 fighting game, featuring frame data for each of its fighters, and having the ability to put the dummy into several states, such as counter hit, to practice things like juggle combos. Before getting into the mechanics, I guess it'd be appropriate to explain the most well-known aspect of the game, and that's the point system. Winning in Fighter's Destiny is calculated on a point-based system when performing certain actions on an opponent will yield a certain amount of points earned, with the goal of the match is earning 7 stars while making the opponent touch the ground with the following actions. These will earn 2 points and is decided by a throw that is not escaped. Locks that KO, landing a parry, or throwing an opponent that is on the ledge will be considered a throwdown. When the strike glows blue, this will have a special effect that will knock the opponent down regardless of their remaining health. These can come in single attacks or at the end of strings, and you will earn up to 3 points if connected. When out of stamina and trying to recover, a character can enter a special state called priority. During this time, the attacking character can do a devastating special attack to the opponent that will net them 4 points. The opponent can still avoid these attacks, however. Not to be confused with counter hits, counters are unique attacks that are usually severely unsafe on block that will win and knock down the opponent if they land on the same frame as an attack's active frames. Landing one will earn 3 points. By default, the game is set to 30 seconds, and this is essentially a timeout. During this time, the game will tally each player on hit accuracy, attacks thrown, damage dealt, and among other things. The player with the higher tally will win the round. This will earn 1 point. This can be very easy or hard depending on the size of the ring. Players just don't fall out of the ring, but in most cases will grab onto the ledge. Attacking them or having them wait too long will have them fall out of the ring. This is the closest the game has to a knockdown state, with the player near the edge being this game version of Uki. This will earn 1 point. The cool part about these rules is that they can be customized, including the size of the ring. So if the player wants to put a focus on a particular part of the gameplay as possible. Want the game to be more about ring outs? Then set the ring out at a higher value and make the ring smaller, or make the ring larger and reduce the points you earn from ring outs if you don't like that aspect. This gives them a lot more wiggle room on how you want to approach the game. Fighter's Destiny has a fair amount of things going for it mechanically for such a simple looking game, but the controls are easy as it can get with only being 4, with 2 attacking buttons, a block button, and a dedicated movement and dodge button, which should be the first thing we go over because it's so important. Hitari or Harai, I leave the pronunciation to you, will dodge any high and low attack while held automatically, which will allow punishment for overly committed strings and more powerful attacks more easily. Hitari loses to mid attacks and cannot escape throws, so the opponent who realizes a player who is overly reliant on this move can easily check them, which could result to a loss of a round. Holding the button while pressing up and down will allow for sidestepping or side hopping. They're pretty slow even for faster characters, and attacks tend to have striking properties, so the sidestepping is mostly for rank positioning and nothing more. Another huge part of this game are locks and throws. Both beat guard and Hatari, and unlike most fighting games, they cannot be ducked. Throws can be broken by holding A and B. Different throws have different timings, which can be seen through the on-screen timer. Some throws even have reversal opportunities. By pressing 2AB while breaking, you could reverse a throw and throw your opponent instead. However, they have less time now to break yours. Locks are similar to throws, but will have to be mashed or be broken. Once again, these have different lengths that require more or less mashing. The aggressor can also mash to extend the length of these as well. While most throws don't have to be broken on reaction, by simply holding A and B preemptively will cause them to be broken at the first available frame. This is called LTE, or lazy throw escape. Yeah, it's pretty overpowered and annoying, but it does have some counterplay. Using LTE to auto-break a throw, the player throwing will not have to worry about reversals as it is not possible with this type of attack. Also, some throws ignore this entirely. Because LTE pretty much rejects the idea of normal throwdowns in neutral, it means a character with locks, especially frontal locks, becomes far more viable, as they have to be mashed in order to be escaped, which means characters who don't have strong frontal locks have a hard time opening players who want to exploit LTE. The overall feel of the game is very similar to that of early Virtua Fighter attackers, except mid-hits can be ducked and can only hit dodging opponents freely. Also, several attacks of this game are usually color-coded in some way. Blue streaks indicate a counter-strike. Blue or white glows mean the attack has a knockdown property. Guard against these attacks will cause a railing effect, which we'll get into in a bit. These essentially turn your attack into a guard break, granting massive frame advantage. Orange streaks mean the attacks will launch on counter hit. Red indicates the attack will launch on normal hit. Real attacks are special attacks that cause lengthened amount of stun animation, which can be often followed up by linking quick attacks after it. During the real attack animation, the player performing the attack will be considered in the counter hit state by any attack, so they shouldn't be thrown out carelessly because they do carry a good amount of startup. Mental attacks are gimmick moves that serve as taunts that are meant to cause your rumble pack to vibrate wildly. What are rumble packs?
Figured it.
Lastly, I would like to cover the game's health system. Much like other fighting games, characters have different health values, which can be seen literally just by looking at them. After taking damage, characters can regain health slowly over time, or by holding the A+B button in neutral, they're able to recover it faster, with different characters recovering at varying speeds. When all health is drained, the character will turn purple and stars will appear over their heads, which signifies that they're in a special dizzy status called priority. During this status, you cannot make any kind of offensive actions, but you're still able to make evasive ones. Throws or locks are guaranteed, and you now become vulnerable to special attacks, which are the most points to be earned at once by default. Mashing the A and B buttons quickly will help you recover health to leave priority faster, but obviously, if it's a character with a higher health value, it'll take longer to recover. Managing to leave the state without taking a hit will have you recover, but with your maximum health reduced by a bit. We might have missed a couple of the more hidden mechanics the game has to offer, but this game is completely unexplored to my knowledge, so it's to be expected. What we did explain here should give you a general understanding of how the game works, however. Overall, Fighter's Destiny is a very strange game to play. It's very slow and stiff. Either that's from just having faster games in our muscle memory, or some combination of it having the player choose between 2D to 3D movement, or playing the game at about 30 frames on the N64. I'm not sure. But it was nice playing a fighting game that didn't require us to learn long command lists or remembering complex pressure or Oki sequences. At its core, the game is just about methodical spacing on movement and attacks, which can be fairly intense in its own right, and very satisfying to earn a round off a well-planned and spaced attack. It's really unfortunate that Fighter's Destiny didn't take off. On the surface, it could come off as just another game trying to ape off a massively successful one in the form of Virtua Fighter, but you would only need to play it to see how unique it really is. Sure, that mostly extends to just the point system entirely, because I'm positive no one's talking about the throw system when remembering the game. But just taking that into account can change how the entire genre is looked at. I would have loved to see this concept expanded on just a little more. Well, for what it's worth, Fighter's Destiny is a well thought out fighting game, and it might be the best N64 design one as well. I think this game should earn the title of Best N64 Fighting Game over Smash. And no, not because Smash isn't a fighting game, or at least not traditionally. But how could this game ever compete with Mario, Zelda, and Pokémon? Especially with those designs. But I am interested. What is the best N64 fighting game? I think TCB is going to have to figure that one out. See you next time on the Runback. Play the clip, TCB. Play the clip.
You are all very good players.
We are all very good players.
You will beat Shelbyville.
We will beat Shelbyville.
You will give
120.
percent.
That's impossible. No one can give more than 100%. By definition, that is the most anyone can give.
So fucking dumb. When we started this Runback series of a kind of heart, I had no idea that the all-girl fighting game went back this far. Like, as soon as people saw Chun-Li in Street Fighter 2 that far. After that, more and more women were added to fighting games until somebody eventually got the bright idea to just say fuck it. Let's make a fighting game composed entirely of estrogen-powered brawlers, and thus, the all-female fighting game subgenre was born, or we like to call it, the Fossentots. Now apparently, the early days of these kind of fighters consisted of mostly games where you defeat your opponent and your reward was seeing them naked. Something I didn't know existed and it really come across as creepy and greasy. I won't judge too hard, it was the early 90s after all, and the internet wouldn't be as prevalent until people my age started to learn about them in middle school. And that was just kids using them to play Cartoon Network Flash games or emulating Sonic and Mega Man games. Anyway, the all-girl fighters arm race continued until a company called Phil & Cafe decided to buck the trend in making these kind of games for potential DJs and drop the pornographic angle. And it turns out once you get rid of that creepy factor of your game, lots of people won't be put off by it and be more willing to play it. It also helps that the game will become one of the most influential fighting games of its time, essentially giving birth to the entire concept of an anime fighter, whose DNA go far and wide to things like Melty Blood to the early Guilty Gears, and that was 1994's ASUKA 120, Burning Fest. The story of this series goes a bit too long for us to cover here, and I don't think we'll be able to do it justice. So for the sake of time, we highly recommend Game Babble's ASUKA 120 retrospective, The Origin of Anime Fighters video if anything we say during this episode interests you in any way to look at it deeper. This video came in clutch for us because we were having such a hard time finding any kind of background on the series, and it puts a lot of things in perspective, especially when it comes down to the gameplay. But more on that later. Now you guys might be asking, TCB, isn't that a little bit of a cop-out? And yes it is, but trust me, this guy did his research, and we will feel bad just paraphrasing what he said and taking that well-made video and try to pass it off as us doing proper research. So yeah, it's a cop-out, and a little homework-ish, but we feel like it's fair, so check it out. The plot of the game, and I guess the whole series as a whole, centers around BloodRayne's private school for women, which throws a yearly martial arts tournament called Club Rivalry Budget Contest Mega Fight, which various clubs compete in the hopes of increasing their club's budget, the prize for winning the tournament. After several poor showings across the years, the Chemistry Club president scouts out and decides to train ASUKA in order to become this year's winner. So the game is essentially high school Mortal Kombat. But as someone who went to public school, I can't find the time to relate to these private school bitches' problems. Make a fighting game about people smoking in the stairwell in the back of the school and you needing to go that way to get to class, then maybe I'll care about your story. Let's get this BS out of the way right here and now. This game gave me the biggest case of false advertisement there has ever been in a situation like this. The splash art of the characters versus the actual playable sprites they represent are two completely different art styles. I will look at one character I had an interest in and go, yeah, she looks cool. Then pick her up, then look at the eye-catch loading screen and still think, yeah, she still looks cool. Then when the game actually starts, I'm presented with this Cyborg 009 bullshit. Great show. And I kept doing it. It's almost like my eyes never caught up with my brain. Catfishing aside, how are the actual graphics of the game? It looks okay at best, maybe even below average for 1999 standards. This game shares the same release year with some of the better looking 2D fighters for their time and ever. Martial Masters, KOF 99, Guro, Mark of the Wolves, and Street Fighter 3 Third Strike all happened. So excuse us for thinking this game doesn't exactly stick the landing in the graphics department. Maybe if they didn't spend all that time getting people all worked up about their splash art, then this probably wouldn't have been a problem. All joking aside though, that was my initial impressions with the game's graphics. The sprite work began to grow on me over our time with the game, and I ended up enjoying some of the character designs quite a bit overall. Although I still feel the game's graphics isn't impressive for the time of Burning Fest Finals release. The backgrounds you'll be punching all these mid as fuck looking gnomes to are just static background pictures of various parts of Japanese high school areas, with some of them populated with other students who don't move at all. It's not a big deal or anything, and it certainly isn't distracting, but who knows, maybe the PlayStation couldn't handle all that. What isn't mad about this game is the soundtrack. You don't have to try to convince me that 90s and anime music is an uncontrollable combo. The soundtrack wouldn't sound too far off from a 90s anime, which I guess what they were trying to go for. It's very energetic and I want to say sporty. It reminds us a lot of Super Sweep work. Super Sweep is a group known mostly for the Street Fighter EX soundtracks, and if you like that style of music, I highly recommend listening to this game's. ASUKA 120 has a lot going on, and that's not just talking about the whole series. For PlayStation version Burning Fest Final, there's a couple of new additions for better or worse. And remember, this is the first game in the series, so our information may not be 100% accurate, but feel free to correct whatever we get wrong in the comments. So mechanically, ASUKA 120 Burning Fest has a little of everything in it. And as said before, you can link some of the longer runner fighting games of the anime variety to this series, and that's very cool. But also kinda challenging when trying to explain the gameplay itself. I don't know where to start, so I'll pick a random spot and we'll build from there. Wish us luck. ASUKA 120 is a neutral based fighting game with heavy emphasis on air footsies. Those who are familiar with games like Akana Heart or Angel Eyes will be aware of that term. To assist with this, every character has access to a double or hyper jump, and unlike most fighting games when doing these two actions, you will have full control of your character, which means that you aren't set to a path while doing these, leaving players open to mixing up their approach, like double jumping and drifting out the way to force an anti-air to whiff, or course correcting a bad jump. While on the ground, characters can dash, and this can force clashing, a very important element of the game that we'll cover in a few. While dashing, hitting the attack button will cause a dashing attack. Any grounded normal can be cancelled into a dash. Combine this with the dash's ability to hop past opponent if you run into them, and there's plenty of interesting ways to open people up if they're not paying enough attention. Dash canceling in order to continue a combo is also a very effective way of racking up damage or wiggling down that pesky stun meter. Once again, we'll explain it. Pressing the C button will have characters perform a counter attack that knocks the opponent away on hit and takes 6.25% of your meter when used. They're also the only way to use normals as your guard cancel, another very important element of the game that we'll cover in a bit. We did say this game had a lot going on. Like most fighters around this time, there's some kind of super meter at play, but Asuka's work a little different. Of course, in order to perform a super, the meter will have to reach 100, which will take you back to 0, duh. But if you're patient, and you can hold off for blowing all your meter, you can reach the 120% of Asuka 120%. Once fully maxed out, you'll have infinite meter for a limited time. Players can also enter a state called Super Rage by hitting the talk button at 120 meter. This serves as something like a V-ism from the Street Fighter Alpha games. Speeding up the character allows them to chain attacks more quickly for longer combos. This, from our understanding, is one of the two major additions that Burning Fest Final brings, and an addition we quite like. Shame the same can't be said for some of the other additional mechanics. Clashing is the act of two attacks colliding with their active frames at the same time. Once again, if you're aware of anime fighters, this information should not be new to you. During the clash, players can cancel to the next action of the attack priority, or whatever move started the clash, cancel to movement options like dash, backdash, or hyper jump, or even cancel to throws in some cases. Dash can give a character one clash frame, and there are also rules to follow when using dash to clash, mostly canceling to another forward dash or some type of jump. Clashing is very important to the game, and expected to happen a ton during a match, so learning how to properly handle yourself during the clashing war or mind game is essential. Another thing players need to get a grasp on is guard canceling. For the sake of simplicity, Asuka 120's take on the mechanic is very similar to that of Sailor Moon S, in which that game gave you the ability to guard cancel anything. Asuka, while having some limitations, give players the ability to pretty much do the same thing, with counter attacks, movement options that also include jumps, specials, and supers all being allowed. Guard canceling can also be done from the air as well, but in this case you can use normals. Now, before we get into our massive problem with Burning Fest Final, we should quickly go over the game's combo system. Although Asuka seems to be the earliest inclusion of a Gatling system that will later be more associated with the Gear to Gear series up till Strive, and other than some slight differences, it's pretty much the same thing. Characters are allowed to juggle their opponent freely for up to 10 hits, with juggling getting progressively tougher after about 7 to 8 hits, meaning that follow-ups will need to be faster. Entering Super Rage mode during a combo will provide infinite juggle points while the timer is active. So maximizing combos to get the most out of your initial 10 juggle points and quickly entering Super Rage mode to continue juggles further seems to be the most optimal way to execute combos. The game also features things like wall and ground slams and various forms of recoveries. Now, as said before, this version of Asuka 120 is the first time we've ever touched the series, and while we were having fun with the mechanics and the freedom the game offers, something felt off. Even with our limited knowledge of the series, damage felt too low, and after some research it turns out that all the characters' health values were doubled for this version of the game, which wouldn't be that big of a problem if they also didn't add the new secondary mechanic, the stun meter. This thing drags the game down by a considerable amount, with most, if not all matches, ending in a timeout, which isn't very satisfying at all. While getting hit, characters will take damage in both health and stun, with more damage being dealt to the stun meter before it's empty. Getting knocked into a wall or the ground without recovering will also take a chunk out of the meter as well. Once it's drained, then characters will begin to actually take damage from their health bar. Stun also regenerates super fast and players go untouched for a while, which just adds more to the dragged out nature of these matches. This didn't feel natural, and it felt as though we were playing the game well enough. Besides, one of the easiest things in fighting games should be KOing the opponent. It is the main objective after all. Confused as to why most of our matches ended in timeout by the time we managed to knock one of our stun meters down to 0, we decided to look into it a little more. And it turns out that this version of the game isn't even developed by the main developers, Feeling Cafe, with the company called Success taking the series after its bankruptcy in 1998, which would explain why this meter felt so crowbarred into the gameplay. To us, the stun meter just kind of feels like it added a whole bunch of unnecessary rules to what's ultimately supposed to be a simple, fast pick up and play game. During our research, we ran into another helpful video, which was Introverted Owl's attempt to explain how to do damage in this game, and that kind of pointed us into the right direction on how to approach it. I wouldn't say any of the info in that video is wrong, but the game is a lot different when you're actually playing against another human. The mechanics of this game lends players to be very slippery, which isn't exactly good on a timer when you also have to drain a whole nother meter in order to do any meaningful damage. The act of being stunned also puts fighters into a juggle state, so you'll have to react to that as well, and if you miss your chance to set something up to hurt, then the whole process starts over again. But who knows, this might have just been a skill issue on our part. This is our first ASUKA 120 game after all. But if you're just asking us, I think the blue meter just gets in the way of everything. It turns a fast fun game that's supposed to boil everything down to a quick match and turns it to scrambles the game. And that's what it constantly feels like. You're constantly in a scramble situation. All this talk about an annoying blue bar that wasn't needed reminds us heavily of the changes that was made to the beat system in BloodRayne 4, which also resulted in a game that was full of timeouts because of the added system didn't exactly mesh well with the core mechanics, among other things.
What did you do to Nagi?
I don't think I need to say this, but ASUKA 120 Burning Fest Final, even with all of its faults, is still better than BloodRayne 4. Just need to put that out there. Our time with ASUKA 120 Burning Fest Final leaves us feeling mixed when it's all said and done. On one hand, what the game carries over from the previous entries holds up shockingly well, and works exactly how you would expect these systems to work, especially when you consider that this game was the forerunner for a whole lot of these types of mechanics. It was interesting to be able to pinpoint where Guilty Gear got things like the Gantlet system, and how titles like Angel Eyes and Arcana Heart got their focus on aerial combat and clashing. It was also cool to learn about the many other games that would go on to inspire, and how the series technically kind of lived on through Melty Blood. But on the other hand, the newer additions to this version of the game was largely unneeded. Doubling the amount of health to extend the length of matches was a bad choice, but I don't believe it would have gotten in the way that much, ultimately due to the faster pace of the game. But what absolutely destroyed the game in our opinion was the stun meter. Having to worry about shipping down the secondary bar, while dealing little damage while chasing around a highly mobile evasive opponent, all under 99 seconds, just caused the game to feel like you just love tapping each other to the eventual timeout. I'm not saying something like this couldn't work, but in this form, it just got in the way of the overall gameplay, and it feels like it wasn't play tested or something. Unless they wanted the game to be a timeout simulator, and if so, mission accomplished. At the end of it all, I'm just glad there's a version of this game that doesn't have these annoying elements, because we really wouldn't have the strength to return and put up with the stun bar. We are grateful for deciding to do something like this for the Runback though, because we would never have discovered this series otherwise. So, I guess I'll just go ahead and play some Overlimit instead. We'd like to thank PFTM Club for suggesting this game, and I hope we did a good enough job covering it. Got a game you want us to cover? Feel free to leave it in the comment section and we'll add it to the list. Or check out our channel community section to know exactly where we're opening the floor for requests. Until then, we'll see you next time on the Runback.
愛してるありのままのすべてを
Through things like the Runback and Mash Masters, we explored and talked about a good amount of fighting games so far on this channel, and out of all of them we can confidently say that we never really encountered a truly bad game yet. Well, there was Battle Construction Vehicles. Some poor kid somewhere out there in the world, instead of having like Bloody Roar or fucking let's say like smaller fighters like Budokai or Arcana Heart, instead of that,
yo!
What?
I'm already dying!
Oh, this guy's good.
Steamroller might be OP!
Whoa! I'm not the better hitbox.
Because Steamroller is only good at one thing! Steamrolling! Steamroller's broken! Steamroller's the Coma!
But aside from that, there wasn't really any other trash can fighting game we've played. Now I know you're looking at the title and you might be thinking, well, the Simpsons Wrestling is going to be another one of those trash can fighting games, right? No. Today on the Runback, we're not only going to prove to you that the Simpsons Wrestling is one of the most slept on fighters ever to be released, but we'll also cover two other games that are equally good, if not better. Just a heads up, since we're covering 3 games today, we won't be following the usual format for the sake of keeping the video as short as possible. Which is fine anyway, we won't need long to convince you. This is Team Crossbody, and prepare to have your little status quo shattered.
We're just warming up now.
As you can tell, the game is largely based around wrestling, but being in the world of The Simpsons, it's a bit more of a wackier take on the sport. Characters won't be just grappling opponents, but there will be also throwing bowling balls, slingshot, and pie throwing and belching to attain victory. The show was wrapping up its 12th season around this time, and any fan of the series would tell you that the show was well out of its golden age at this point. I disagree, but that didn't stop the game from sporting one of the best rosters found in a licensed game. This includes every relevant character the show was using around this time, especially fan favorites such as Bumblebee Man. Each character is painstakingly brought to life through the game's amazing visuals and animations. The backgrounds are jam-packed with cameos of other Springfield citizens that seamlessly blend into the game's world, making you feel like you're playing a part of a special episode of the show. The arenas also assist in this feeling, putting the ring right in the middle of famous areas like the Nucleon Plank or the Quickie Mart. One of the more standout elements of the series, at least to me, is the music. And this game translates that massively by representing what you would hear from the show to an absolute T. The dev team was even considerate enough to give players a break after each track ends, so you can appreciate the fact that the game brought over the voice cast. Speaking of the cast, before each match, characters will have a moment to talk to their opponents. And not only are these segments unique to each character, but they also reveal hidden lore about them.
Vaya con Dios, my bumblebee compadre.
¡Ay, Chihuahua! Espero que el hombre santo no me golpe violentamente.
Your rake will prove ineffective against my non-violent practices and my kick-ass kung fu.
You'll pay for this with your children's blood. I'm gonna crush you with my patented supersonic lard bomb.
You must be pretty proud of yourself, wrestling an 8-year-old.
Clearly, this is where NRS got their pre-fight dialogue idea from. The Simpsons wrestling is a neutral-based fighting game that functions more like an arena fighter more than anything else. The goal is to reduce your opponent's health enough for a 3-count pennant attack. Each character has access to 3 attacks: light, heavy, and gimmick, a grab that's unique to each character, and jumping attacks. Each character attack can vary greatly, with some of them being really strong. And to prevent these attacks from being broken, Big 8 Productions ingeniously put them behind a stamina bar that needs to be constantly refilled in order to unleash these awesome abilities. This can be done by returning neutral unless your character will suffer from burnout, similar to Street Fighter 6, but an actual punishment as you won't be able to do much aside from playing footsies with weak attacks until you regain enough stamina to start using more powerful moves again. Managing the stamina bar while using everyone's fast movement speed to weave in and out of effective ranges adds such a show of decision making not seen in modern fighting games today. Within the roster of the game is another concept that was lost to the day age of homogenization, and that's the use of character archetypes. From zoners, set play, rushdown, movement-based, puppet, or oddballs, each character brings something unique, and the game accounts for the matchup issues by supplying random power-ups throughout the match to keep things honest. Speaking of pickups, every character could perform a taunt by collecting the corresponding letters throughout the match. Unleashing the taunt will stun the opponent for a short time while giving your character invincibility. This works as a replacement for your typical super/special meter, and is completely balanced as you have to give up pressure or a chance to punish to collect the letters or power-ups in general, but sometimes the risk is worth the reward. The game does a fantastic job at keeping its roster balanced, but it doesn't mean it's exempt from having strong characters. From Groundskeeper Willie and his excellent ranges and pen setups, to Barney Gumble sporting fantastic area of denial abilities. But there's one character who stands above them all. Ned Stands is the only character that breaks this perfect balance, but don't let him stop you from trying this amazing game. How it took this game so long to be discovered as a great tournament fighter is disgusting. Give it a try if you're sick of modern fighting games that aren't designed for people who actually like the genre. You won't be sorry.
Yeah, party on!
Next on the list is the criminally underrated Star Wars game, Masters of Terras Cassie. Now you might be thinking, TCB, you managed to effortlessly explain your case about the greatness of Simpsons wrestling, but you guys surely don't have anything nice to say about Terras Cassie. All audience of little faith, let us cook. Terras Cassie released in '97, and as we all know, there wasn't any real impactful 3D fighters out in the wild during this time. Stop looking at me sideways. What? Are you guys gonna limp to the barn with Tekken 1 or 2? Soul Edge or Virtua Fighter 3? Pfft, trash. All trash. And now I know you aren't talking about Tekken 3. Released on the same year as this masterpiece? Nah, that game was a pack-up too. Why play that janky gym simulator when Star Wars does everything that game does like 100 times better? Besides, the weebs who actually owned the PlayStation 1 had to wait until '98 before Tekken 3 actually made its way to consoles. So Masters of Terras Cassie was objectively the only good choice, with the only other game being as close to the masterful design of this one being the last one on today's list. Before we get into the gameplay proper, just look at it. I don't think I need to explain the sights and sounds of this game. This was made before the prequels appeared to rewrite how good movies were made, so we only had to go off the original trilogy for this one, and needless to say, they nailed everything about the looks of those films. The game will have you battling on famous locales such as Hoth, Dagobah, Cloud City, and Tatooine. And to help elevate the mood of each fight, these stages are accompanied by such an amazing musical score that you think Lucasfilms ripped them right from the movies themselves. The roster is also jammed packed with Star Wars all-stars, such as Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, Princess Leia Organa, Chewbacca, Boba Fett, and Han Solo, but it also includes plot-heavy characters like Thok. But that's not all. We also have original characters, Master of Terras Kasi herself, Arden Lin, and our student Hor. Then finally, the extended universe characters, Joe Dukas, and fan favorite, Mara Jade.
As the creator of Mara Jade,
Wait! I am not the creator of Mara Jade, and I want you to get out of this office right now.
And now for the gameplay itself. Star Wars Master of Terras Kasi is a 3D fighter that incorporates both armed and unarmed combat into its gameplay, which was unheard of for a fighter of this time, and also features something else that was revolutionary for 3D fighters, and that was the Force Meter. Force is built by dealing and taking damage, and this allows characters access to powerful Force moves when the appropriate amount is reached. And these techniques are indeed powerful and will usually deal massive damage if not wrangle the opponent outright. Some people might call this overpowered, but it's far from. In actuality, the balance of these moves are perfect considering how hard it is to build meter. The devs also intelligently implemented 2 other balancing checks to limit the power of force moves. This game might look like it's hard to control from your point of view, but this is, in reality, one of the smartest ways to make sure characters aren't too powerful. With movement feeling almost sluggish and stiff, it allows the cast to take advantage of what makes them unique and encourages the use of weapons. The movement also makes players control their characters more carefully, as the arenas features ringouts. So if the player finds themselves on the edge of the ring, with an opponent stiffly approaching, they will have to quickly decide if they want to attempt to move or stand their ground, much like the Rebels would often do against the Empire, which creates a beautiful connection between source material and video game, not seen in licensed games that often suffer from ludonarrative dissonance, a truly underrated element of the game. This, combined with the game's deliberate difficult input buffering, prevents any one character from being too good, which slowly teaches players to properly consider their distances for neutral, almost like the game is channeling the samurai movies that inspired Star Wars in the first place. Those who are looking for an absolute perfect representation of the Star Wars IP should give Masters of Terras Kasi a look at. I don't want to say the game is life-changing, but it will change something in you after playing.
Ring out. You win.
Hey, hold on to your seats.
The last topic on the docket for today, and perhaps the most slept on game, is Dragon Ball GT Final Bout. Releasing in 1997 to an overwhelmingly negative reception, Final Bout has the reputation of being the worst fighting game to be ever put out. I can't blame people for jumping to this conclusion. Admittedly, Final Bout doesn't put its best foot forward as it doesn't feel the need to explain any of its mechanics to the player. But with a little elbow grease, the hidden depth can be revealed. The sounds and visuals are all appropriate for Dragon Ball. You won't find anything out of place in those departments. The graphics to Final Bout are quite good, if you consider this being the first game in the Dragon Ball franchise to be completely rendered in 3D. So it should get a little pass for looking a bit mediocre. The music, on the other hand, feels very strange for a fighting game. It's very high fantasy, and normally would be out of place for a Dragon Ball game. But since it was based on GT, they obviously took the risk of going for this kind of music, which was very stunning and brave. With a cast as large and as varied as Dragon Ball, it was very considerate of the developers to put multiple of the same character into the roster, even if it means it was bare minimum differences between them. Here's an example. There's Base Goku, S Goku, and everyone's favorite, SS Goku. And then there's Trunks, and his transformations taking up roster spots. This includes Z and GT. But then strangely, there's only Vegeta in his Super Saiyan form that's available. It's odd, but it's ultimately a smart move because everyone loves Goku vs Trunks mirror matches. The last thing we need to cover before getting into the gameplay proper is the voice acting.
You seem happy. I won't let you interfere.
You see, Final Bout was the first Dragon Ball game released in the West, so the normal voice cast wasn't used. So they had to get a bit creative. Have you ever heard of Steve Blum? He voiced Goku in this game. And did you know Blum also voiced Spike Spiegel from Cowboy Bebop, who we discovered was married to Mary Elizabeth McGlynn, who voices Nina Williams from the Tekken series, who happened to star in a little game called Death by Degrees, which was reviewed by Team Crossbody, a gaming channel primarily focused on fighting games that happens to be reviewing Dragon Ball GT Final Bout, where we are playing as Goku. Anywho, the gameplay to Final Bout is very similar to the Batoten games, so characters can punch, kick, and throw weak ki blasts by inputting various commands that can perform signature attacks from the series to innocuous amounts of punch and kick combinations. All of these attacks feel like they were retro-sculpted right out of the show itself. The game gives players the ability to fly around at the press of a button, which gives an unprecedented amount of freedom and strategy when approaching the match, which is a great choice by the dev team by making the basic movement so ungodly slow, cumbersome, and glitchy feeling. Basic attacks feel unresponsive and unfinished, but Visitor and Courage are two main mechanics that put Final Bout over the edge as one of the best Dragon Ball games ever made, and that's the Medio system and demonstration system. If you ever wanted to experience all the fast punch and kicking you usually see in the series, then the amazing Medio system is for you. By simply pressing R2 and 4 near an opponent, it will launch them into a special state that can be followed up after hitting a certain combination of buttons. As your character begins to land blows upon the enemy, inputting another combination along with the direction will continue the onslaught up to 8 times. At any time, before reaching the 8 smashes, you can knock the opponent away and try to finish them off with a ki blast, which blends effortlessly into the demonstration system, but we're not there yet. I'm going to edge you a bit longer.
Oh my!
Opponents who are looking to counter the Medio smash being used on them can enter their own command during the attack. If they guess right, they'll be able to turn the tables on their offender and enter a Medio smash of their own. This will keep going till either character is KO'd. Luckily, the game will often not read your input and the Medio will just unceremoniously end. This is great design because it returns the game to its intentional shitty movement. The big climax to everything is the demonstration system, or just demo, is another mechanic that aims to give the player that spectacle of the show. This time by giving players the choice to do what they want with a signature attack. Normally, just entering a typical command, the character will just perform the attack, but by doing it at a respectable distance, the camera will begin to circle the character charging the attack. During this time, the counter sign will appear, and the defending player will have a small time to put in 1 out of 4 different commands in order to deal with the upcoming attack. This includes blocking it or just knocking the energy blast away. You can either counter it with your own blast that would create a beam struggle, in which both players will have to mash the triangle button in order to decide the winner. These mechanics put players right into the seemingly wooden shoes of the characters of DBZ/GT. Final Bout isn't a perfect game overall, but its amazing gameplay, although largely undiscovered, still holds up by even today's standards, offering more character variety and gameplay depth than that of DBZ Fighters. I don't know, maybe it'll finally be surpassed by the upcoming Sparkling Zero. If you're looking to play a far more competitive version of that upcoming game, then Dragon Ball GT Final Bout is right up your alley. Now, with that all wrapped up, it's time to work on our next video, why every character in Guilty Gear Strive should be trans, and how you can be too. The best guys! I guess 1 month is too long to wait for a new Runback.
Yeah, I guess 1 month is too long to wait for a Runback. What the hell was I doing? Oh, that's right. I was reacting.
Those 3 reviews would be positively terrifying if any of them were true. Hello, this is Tower Tosel, legally distinct voice of Howard Cosell, and for some reason a part of Team Crossbody's back pocket. Dropping by to tell you that he hoped you enjoyed Tales from the Crossbody.
There was no other series more synonymous with the mecha genre than Gundam. I mean, I think. There is more, but when we were growing up, it was all about Gundam. And Robotech. And the Transformers, kinda. In our case, Genocyber if our parents weren't around. Gundam is pretty popular, that's what I'm trying to get at. I can't say if it is now, but we kind of fell out with the series around Gundam Seed. And that was around the time we was introduced to the Armor Core series to fill that mecha-shaped void. Much like Dragon Ball and name another anime, I don't know, Gundam has a metric crap ton of games made on the IP since 1983. And shockingly, we seem to have avoided almost all of these games. I do remember getting Gundam Versus back on the whim, and not really enjoying it. We also tried Gundam Evolution, which was a hero shooter that I liked very much, but it was shut down not too soon after I tried to get into it. Anyway, around the time when we first started putting out YouTube videos, we got a request to cover a game called Gundam Battle Assault. A series we never heard of before. At first we thought it was a PlayStation port of the Gundam Wing Endless Duel, but it turned out to be a completely different thing on its own, with a handful of cool features and mechanics that helps it stand out from a typical 2D fighter. This is Team Crossbody, and this is our look at the Gundam Battle Assault series.
Okay, so some quick house cleaning needs to be done before we can start proper. The Battle Assault series are revisions of a Japanese-only series called Gundam the Battle Masters, with Battle Assault being largely based off the Battle Masters 2, with the only major difference between the two games being the removal and replacement of some of the more non-relevant mechs, with the ones from Gundam Wing, which was making the rounds on Toonami on Cartoon Network at the time. We're also only covering games under the Battle Assault name, which you should understand why after hearing about the first 2 entries. The first Gundam Battle Assault released for the Sony PlayStation in 2000 and was developed by Natsumi, the same developers of both Gundam Wing Endless Duel and Mighty Morphin Power Rangers The Fighting Edition. The game uses multi-limb sprites that are all animated individually that makes the Gundams come off as puppet-like, but it helps sell the fact that you're supposed to be controlling massive robots, which is a little different than something like Capcom Cyberbots, where the mechas still moved as if they were in Darkstalkers, or a similar game like Marvel vs. Capcom. Your chosen mobile suit will sustain damage throughout the match depending on what area is currently taking the most punishment. It doesn't have any gameplay implications to my knowledge, but it does look cool to see your mech all beat up after a fight, or to watch the enemy mobile suit explode seeing all those battle effects happen at once, exposing the mecha's inner frame and mechanical details. But the overall graphics of the game are really good, and I think this game would easily pass for an early PS2 title. But let's get into the gameplay, and before we talk about what makes the game unique, let's go over the basics. Trust me, it'll save us a ton of time later. Battle Assault's a 5-button game with a weak and strong punch and kick, as well as a thruster button. Matches forgo the usual rounds and replace it with a Darkstalkers like health-based round system, where there are multiple health bars, and after reducing one to 0, there will be a quick break in the action before starting up again, and whatever damage the winner of the round took and resources used are carried over to the next round. Unlike most games that typically adopted the Capcom-style Magic series around this time, Gundam Battle Assault uses a cancel system that's very similar to Gatlin from the Guilty Gear series, in which each character has their own unique cancel routes. It's a little awkward when first starting out, but once gotten used to, it's very ergonomic. Normals in this game cannot be canceled on whiff or block. This limits the overall pressure the game could have. That's not to say there's not things like block strings, but it usually involves linking your character's plus on block buttons to try to keep your turn, while throwing in the mix up here and there to keep them guessing. Now, there are some attacks that can be canceled on whiff or block, but these seem to be far and few between. Special attacks follow the same rule of not being able to be canceled outside of a hit confirm, which means players won't be doing the standard things like ending a block string with a special move, which will reduce them to only being used as combo enders and extensions. Super attacks in this game are viewed as special attacks, so they follow the same rule as well. The game also has things like chip damage, OTGs, and unblockable attacks that all have their own little Gundam Battle Assault quirk to them. But we didn't have the time to fully understand these concepts, such as the strange rules when it comes to OTGing the opponent and how unblockable attacks are considered projectiles. In Gundam Battle Assault, throws and stuns are kinda the same thing. By getting close to the opponent and pressing back or forward along with Strong Punch will cause your suit to stun the opponent for a small amount of time that allows for full combos after these attacks are performed. And although the stun itself does no damage, it counts towards the combo and adds to the overall damage scaling. These throw/stun attacks can also be special and thrust or canceled on hit. Pressing 2 attack buttons together will have your suit perform either a spot dodge or deploy a projectile immune barrier. Spot dodges are fully invincible for the duration and can be done out of block stun. It also allows players to block right after it's done. Suits that uses a barrier, as said before, gives them the ability to absorb projectiles for a short time. Barriers also come with the perk of absorbing unblockable attacks since they're considered projectile attacks. With comparing the two, spot dodges will mean that your character will have access to the better defensive option, but will have a harder time navigating the usually projectile-filled neutral of Gundam Battle Assault. While those with barriers are considered more defensively weaker, but doesn't have to worry about getting into their preferred ranges while in neutral. Both actions also require a portion of health to be used, for whatever reason. Most characters have access to super attacks called Mega Specials by inputting down forward into attacking buttons. Like most games around this time, there is a clear divide when it comes to the usefulness and utility of these attacks. Characters who do have super start the match with a stock of 3 that can be used at any time, and they have no way of being replenished once used. For some reason, Ball and Noah Gundam are the only suits in the game that doesn't have Mega Specials. Putting aside it looking pretty dumb watching a bunch of war mechs flipping around and roundhouching each other in the face, the game does consider the height and weight of them. So you won't be seeing any suits running around at each other with the grace of a gazelle. Well, you will eventually, but it still looks pretty clumsy. But with that being said, general movement in Gundam Battle Assault is to be expected, and does fall in line with similar traditional fighting games, with forward dashes, back dashes, jumps, and within the movement is the most unique mechanic, thrusting. Thrust. Using thrusters is key to understanding the neutral of Gundam Battle Assault. Thruster jumps can be considered similar to super jumps from an anime fighter, and can be used at any time and in any state that isn't attacking. They're used to mix up approaches, stall in the air, get out of pressure, create space from the opponent, and a bunch of other situations. It's really flexible. Inputting down forward thruster will have your suit enter a special movement state called Venero mode. Working as something as a flight state, suits are able to freely fly around in all 8 directions, gains armor against projectiles, and are considered airborne, while it slowly drains your thruster meter. While it's a pretty cool mechanic, we couldn't really find a proper use to it. Venero mode isn't nearly as useful as just normal boosting around, which is infinitely better. It's just really slow to activate, and it's really expensive to do so in the first place. Thrusters can be activated on knockdown, which will act as a quick rise, which will perform a thruster jump but with invincibility. These are really strong, but will also cost thruster meter as well. Movement with thrusters is a major part of the game, as without it, your fat ass will be moving like a, well, fat ass. Although it does regenerate pretty quickly, not respecting and abusing your thruster meter will leave you getting hit with all kinds of nonsense. Mega specials and thruster meters aren't the only thing you'll be managing because each suit has a finite number of ammo that can be used throughout the match. Each suit starts off with 500 ammo, and the amount that is used is dependent on the character. The flow of combat is strange and kinda hard to explain. It definitely makes sense once you actually experience it yourself, but if you had to give it a loose comparison, I suppose I would call it a 2D virtual arm. Does that make sense? It feels as though these mechanics would make a lot more sense with something like an arena fighter. Hint, hint. But despite how it actually can feel, I guarantee that once you get past it, the game feels really good to play. Well, maybe not this one per se. Things feel a little too sluggish here. The input buffering doesn't feel great at all. Movement without boosted made me feel like my mobile suit was moving by itself because of how delayed the action was, and looking down to see the timer was really annoying. This might be a little petty, but I also hate the portraits of the pilots at the bottom of the screen. They're so big and they don't do anything, and it just gets under my skin while looking at them for whatever reason. Well, to be fair, I think the UI design in this game is really ugly in general. Just look at the character selection screen. If you don't know any of these names, then best of luck trying to tell these guys apart from a small icon and a grayed out portrait that you can barely make your character out of. Anyway, clearly these are issues that can be easily looked past, seeing that the sequel fixes a lot of them. But before we move on to that, let's take a quick look at what Gundam Battle Assault has to offer with game modes. It won't take long because there's only 2 to choose from. And no training, which is strange, and will be a reoccurring theme for the series. Training does eventually make an appearance, but it's in the least likely one to have it. Battle Assault doesn't have much, just 2 game modes, story and versus. The story mode is strange. Players take control of Hero from Gundam Wing, and instead of just piloting Wing 0, he has to pick up 12 suits from across the series. The mode itself is just your box standard ladder one where Hero or the opponent finding random reasons to smash their mechs together. After the fight, he'll tell the beaten opponent to leave their mech, and some do, and some straight up don't and just leave the area. And that's it really. Do that 7 or 8 times, I lost count, and it's done. I mean, it's framed behind some kind of dude collecting mobile suits, but it's barely brought up, and we started to lose our attention span due to how nonsensical the story behind these fights are. Throughout the story, you'll be put up against giant mobile suits as boss battles. Some are easy like Big Zam, where you can boost behind him and just freely wail on him until you win, to some more annoying fights like Psycho Mark III, who's not that easy to cheese, and has all the normal abilities of a standard suit, but does tons of damage and doesn't suffer from hit stun. Well, to be fair, we did timer cheese him in order to win. The roster is fairly large with about 21 suits to choose from, with a couple of them needing to be unlocked. I suppose if you don't count the boss characters as normal, then it's much smaller. They're fun to play with if you're looking for a dumb play session, but they aren't as interestingly designed as normal characters, so it kinda gets old fast. I would have loved if these guys stayed in single player and Nasumi provided us with a couple more suits to fill in the gaps, but for what it's worth, it's a decent novelty. All in all, with a unique look and gameplay, paired with a solid soundtrack, makes Gundam Battle Assault a really awesome game to check out. If we were kids and knew this game existed, it would have easily led to month-long begging segments to our parents to get it. It maybe even would have helped prevent us from forgetting the franchise as easy as we did.
Second battle. Attack the enemy mobile suit.
Gundam Battle Assault 2 was released in 2002 and is a direct follow-up to Battle Assault, bringing over the same exact gameplay, of course, with a few tweaks and improvements to, well, everything. Battle Assault 2 is a massive glow up from the first game, and to correct most of the issues I had with the first one. But since this is just the first game, but better, is not a whole lot to talk about that we didn't cover in the first game, as the foundation didn't need much change to begin with. It was already extremely solid. Told you that getting the basics out the way would save tons of time later. First things first, the overall presentation have gotten a massive boost. The menus have a lot more personality, and the music, in my opinion, is a lot more dynamic and eventful. The UI during matches look way better, and the newly added mobile suits all look great and much more cleaner than Battle Assault. And God, that character select screen looks so freaking clean. Like I actually tell who the hell I'm selecting. There is so much style. I don't even mind not being able to hear the sexy computer lady. The stages have a lot more going on in them too, which gives them so much more life. These small improvements alone are fantastic. It also has a much improved single player mode with streets. Was it called streets? I don't know. If anyone knows, please let me know. Unlike the first game that had all the suits controlled by a hero for some reason, thankfully this one pairs the mobile suit up with the appropriate pilot. Although once again, there's more limits the amount of characters that can be used in it. It pretty much plays the same being an arcade run of 8 matches with some bosses thrown in here and there. As for the gameplay, there's some tweaks that I like. The pace of the game feels so much faster and the inputs are a lot more responsive. In Battle Assault 1, performing the dodge or activating the barrier used to come at the cost of a little health, but none of these actions consume thruster, which is a better option because boosting is the most important thing you can do, and having another action that takes from it adds much more to the moment-to-moment decision making. I also want to say that the active thrusting looks a lot faster as well, but that could be a placebo effect due to the overall increased speed of the game. If I had any complaints about the gameplay and presentation, it would be nitpicky at best, but I actually don't like the removal of boosting forward. It was replaced by jetting upwards of that direction instead now. If you want a quick burst of movement without leaving the ground, the suits will have to commit to normal dashing. It doesn't do any harm or anything, but I'm just wondering why it was done. If I had to guess, it would be to make zoning a little stronger, but who knows. Suits like Ball still doesn't have a special. Each character only have one and they really couldn't be bothered to give him one. But apparently Ball's a pretty solid choice, so what do I know? The normal mobile suits generally has more combo paths than the returning ones, and the special beam attacks all have this generic pinkish beam thing going on, and I wish there was more differences. And that's Gundam Battle Assault 2, a fantastic improvement to what was an already solid game. Battle Assault 2 still have an active community that plays this game to this day, so if you're interested in checking the game out, I'd recommend hopping on the Discord. Although the 2 remaining games in the series will retain some of the ideas, mechanics, and systems that these 2 games provided, this was the last entry that had this particular style of gameplay, which is an unfortunate decision because it would have been nice to see it improved on somewhere.
Third battle. Attack the enemy mobile suit.
Mobile Suit Gundam Seed Battle Assault, released in 2004, it might be the most shocking game we played during this retrospective. At first we were ready to dismiss it as just another fighting game on the GBA that would be sloppily put together for a quick buck. But we were pleasantly surprised and taken off guard with how impressive this game actually is. The sprite work is amazing. The Gundams have a fantastic amount of detail to them, and even though I'm sure a lot of these sprites seem to be missing animations here and there, they still look highly impressive in motion. The backgrounds are simple but do the job well enough. And the same can be said for the music, which features all the boops and beeps expected for a GBA title. That's not to say it's bad. We love GBA chiptune. Seed Battle Assault essentially takes some of the concepts from the previous games and tweaks them enough into something that forms an anime fighter. Gameplay is extremely fast due to the focus on airborne movement that creates constant hollow mix-ups. There's also mechanics here that are new to the Battle Assault series, such as guard breaks, guard cancels, and combo breakers. The controls of the game are simple and allow for 2 modes of play, automatic and manual. Automatic allows you to do special moves from a dedicated button, as well as performing motion inputs with a simple attack press of direction. Manual allows players to do moves via motion input. There's no added advantage to using manual over automatic, as the game is absolutely designed with automatic in mind, so you might as well use that one exclusively. Thrusters in this game works as if your character is constantly in Venero mode, as your suit can boost freely around with 8-way movement. It also allows for floating, short hopping, and dashing. Boosting around also lasts much longer than this game than others. Thrusting during a forward dash also returns, but doesn't consume meter. It will also put you airborne, and canceling out of a forward dash with an attack will cause air moves to come out. The ammo system from the previous 2 games doesn't return in its usual form, and now is kind of worked into the game's phase shift armor or PS gauge. The PS gauge handles your suit's defensive abilities. By attacking the opponent, the gauge will slowly drain, and will eventually break once it reaches 0. From there, the pilot of your opponent will now be gray, meaning the character will now receive double the damage from attacks. Using special moves will also drain from the PS gauge as well, so they can't be abused. Like I said, this is similar to how ammo was handled in the other Battle Assault games, but with a lot more risk involved now. Once per match, suits can enter in a stall state called Berserk Mode, or Seed Mode. There's no difference between the two, so I guess it's from whatever bullshit goes on in the show. While in this state, damage output increases but will slowly drain your SP gauge. You can perform super attacks in this mode as well. Entering this state can also be used as a burst to escape combos or a cancel. We haven't labbed it much, but it's safe to assume it's used for things like keeping yourself safe after making a bad move, or for combo extensions. Before a match, players will have the choice to change their health, PS, and thruster meters, much like before a race in the F-Zero series. Of course, pooling into one area will have the game balance out the remaining values among the other stats. This is a pretty good idea, and I think would actually work wonders with the first 2 Battle Assault games. Gundam Seed Battle Assault definitely channels the energy of Natsume's SNES fighters like Endless Duel. I guess that makes sense given that the GBA is essentially a portable version of that, but if we're allowed to make a more random comparison, we believe the game with its speed, focus on airborne combat, and meter that players will have to work down in order to deal more damage to the opponent makes the game feel like a more realized version of ASUKA 120 Burning Fest Final. But that's just us. However you want to compare the game, there's no denying that this might be one of the best, if not best, fighting game to be released for the GBA. We're super impressed with it.
Final battle. Attack the enemy mobile suit.
Gundam Battle Assault 3 featuring Gundam Seed also released 2004, a couple of months after the GBA spinoff, and is the first game to be in full 3D. The transition which turned the game into a full-blown arena fighter. Bamco started early with scamming people with these games, huh? BS3 took a ton from the GBA entry this time around, while leaving behind the ideas of the older games. The graphics are fine and the mobile suits all look cool. The environments are interesting and varied with plenty of destructible objects, but I feel like something was lost in the move to 3D. The series used to do a great job of selling the fact that they were slow moving machines, even with the more serial looking animations of a clunky robot doing a karate sweep. But now we have Gundams moving like they're guys in costumes, effortlessly doing spin kicks, flexing and twisting in various ways. I don't think a 2-ton War Machine should move. Hell, even the GBA game sold more to me the fact that these are robots more than this game. As stated before, the gameplay works almost 1-for-1 from Gundam Seed Assault, without anything interesting added to the gameplay other than the ability to move in 3D space. There's the buffs you can apply to your mechs during a fight, and the command prompts you can bring up that does something once you have the time to input the commands. But that's about it from what the time we can gather from the game. This style of gameplay would have been more oppressive and more appropriate for something the size of a GBA, even a 2D Gundam fighter in general, but added to a more larger game it'll come across as overly simplistic and brain dead. I feel like with some slight adjustments, the original Battle Assault mechanics would have fit nicely into a 2.5D game, or even a solid arena fighter if they really had the time to figure everything out. The game is fun to play with someone, but yeah, that can be said with any game. Assault 3 gameplay just isn't good. It's not completely trash, but the charm of the other games is clearly not there. Sorry there wasn't enough to talk about with this one.
Gundam Battle Assault was an unexpected series of well-made games. Well, the first 3 entries at the very least. It's sad how it went out with a whimper with the 3rd, technically 4th game. It definitely deserved much better. I would love to see some kind of remake or sequel based largely off Battle Assault 2, since that's considered the best entry in the series by a wide margin. And we need more unique fighters out there nowadays. Oh wait, Namco Bandai will have to either publish or develop the game. Never mind, just keep playing Battle Assault 2. We'll see you next time on the Runback.
Cardinal Syn in the war-ravaged Bloodlands, where the story tells tales of centuries of death, violence, and chaos. The constant warring of the 5 clans is finally put to an end when a nomadic angel, a sand seeker only known as the Wanderer, holding aloft his fantastical book of knowledge, he brought unity to the lands. Decades of peace followed, until the night the Wanderer gathered the leaders of each clan, and before his departure bestowed upon them 5 mysterious scrolls. However, war soon retook the lands. Before complete annihilation was inevitable, a mysterious royal woman appeared, bearing the sigil of the Wanderer, ended the conflict, and turned their scrolls into 3 magically inscripted swords. This woman was Syn.
Let the grand tournament begin.
With the gauntlet laid, the clans were to gather their champions, and they participated in battles that test their strength, courage, and mortality, seeking out only the worthy. This is Cardinal Syn.
Cardinal Syn released in 1998 and was developed by Kronos Digital Entertainment, who are apparently no strangers to the world of fighting games, with such past releases as the infamous Criticom and Dark Rift. Well, Criticom at the very least, we've never really heard of Dark Rift. Suppose it can't be too much better if it was part of what was dubbed the Trilogy of Terror, which could have been coined because the worlds made for these games being darker in tone, or because of the actual quality of them. And judging that Kronos is no longer with us, closing their doors sometime in 2002, it's safe to assume that it was the latter, which might not bode well for us once we actually start playing the game, but I guess we'll find that out soon enough. After taking a quick look at both of their previous additions to the genre, Cardinal Syn looks like they just took a lot from Dark Rift and just pivoted the setting to one of dark fantasy. Must have been because their 2 previous games, which were heavy with the science fiction, wasn't very popular, which I guess is fair. Fresh coat of paint, get away from the whole sci-fi universe thing, new perspectives and whatnot. Kronos' usual fighting game tag partner, Vic Tokai, apparently wasn't feeling a new perspective and dropped out of making video games in totality in 1997, after Dark Rift's release. It was the last game published by that company. Luckily for them, they happened to strike a deal with 989 Studios to develop another game, Cardinal Syn. Okay, so let's get the obvious out of the way real quick. The game was largely inspired by Namco's Soul Edge and Art Blade. That inspiration ran so deep that the team actually purchased an arcade cabinet of the game in order to play it in their studio. The final product does try to implement several of Soul Edge's systems and mechanics to interesting and varying results. The team also wanted to add things such as giving players the ability to knock weapons out of each other's hand, but since their studio had way more artists on hand than actual developers, ideas of those just had to remain just that. Speaking of art, Kronos decided to bring in professional sword fighters and stuntmen in order to perform the motion capture in this time, which was the first for the company. Before then, the employees themselves were the ones handling that aspect that was used in games like Dark Rift. The staff members were split into 3 different body types: small, medium, and chunked. Kronos staff would perform all the standard attacks and professionals would stand in to do the more complex ones. They wanted to achieve an animation quality similar to their inspiration, but found it difficult to do as they were learning on the fly. All in all, Kronos seemed to be pleased with the final result of the animation as a whole, as they believed they were on par with other American developers, but failed to stack up against their Japanese counterpart, aka Soul Edge. Upon release, Cardinal Syn gathered middle to negative reviews. Some reviews, like from Game Informer, RIP I guess, seems to be a bit more positive on the game than others, but that looks like the exception and not the rule. An early review of the game from Next Generation gave it a 2 out of 5 and called it a pretty, if confusing, waste of time and effort. Another early review from GamePro said Cardinal Syn isn't the kind of action sedative you need, especially in the middle of a heated match. The sin committed in this game is simple mediocrity. Damn, double the damage for that pun there. In an interview in 2004 with the founder of Kronos, the late Stanley Liu, over at GameCritics.com, has him reflecting a bit on his time developing Cardinal Syn and the other fighters in Kronos' library. The downside is that we're still living up to the "from the makers of Criticom" comment after all these years. Furthermore, we got stuck doing fighting games for a while simply because we were one of the very few US game developers that actually made a fighting game. Hence Dark Rift and Cardinal Syn. Looking back, we did what we had to do in order to survive and grow as a company. In many ways, without those titles, we would not have a chance to build up our technology and capability to create fair effect. So if it wasn't for their games like Cardinal Syn, the company would have never really had the chance to taste a little success with the likes of the awesome Fair Effect series. We should do a nostalgia tours about that. Which proves that even with colossal fuck-ups like Criticom and apparently Dark Rift, lessons can be learned from it. Fair Effect would go on to have another sequel back in 2001 before Chronos closed shop, and then we all got to watch the series get mishandled by Square Enix several years later, which is now triggering me. So we'll just move on now.
So, Cardinal Syn's opening FMV tried to establish a very epic feeling with the narrator just dumping exposition at us, which is both somehow too much and not enough information. But instead of getting a story about souls and swords eternally retold, it's more like a story of war, MacGuffins, confusion, and a possible sex change. But jury's still out on that one. You look confused. Let me continue. The story takes place in generic fantasy world, aka the Bloodlands, where several warring clans have edged on their throat for quite some time, for generations in fact. When one day a mysterious old man known as the Wanderer suddenly appeared, and thanks to his Book of Infinite Knowledge, or something, caused the fighting among the clans to cease. The Wanderer then summons all the leaders together, and then gave them each a scroll before disappearing. This apparently didn't sit right with the leaders, because they went right back to the fighting and the feuding as soon as he bounced. After an untold amount of time during a particularly nasty looking battle, yet another mysterious cloaked person randomly appears, carrying the same amulet the Wanderer once had, and that once again stopped the fighting. This woman went by the name of Syn. She gathers the clan leaders once again, but this time convincing them to hand over their scrolls so she could turn those 5 scrolls into 3 swords for whatever reason. Then she randomly declares, "It's tournament time, baby!" with each of the clans sending their strongest warrior as a representative. Once the winner emerges and goes looking for a reward, Syn suddenly goes on her villain arc and kills the guy. After that, she hasn't been seen in decades. Not until someone who was also random, couldn't have been Syn, she wasn't seen in decades, remember? Anyway, whoever it was that declared there was tournament time again, everyone just goes with it, despite not hearing from the champion or Syn in years, or nothing really happening to the Bloodlands either. For a plot breakdown that lasts well into the 2-minute range, there is a shocking lack of information here. What are the clans warring over? One would assume it would be the lands itself, but it's never said. The big dumb magical wanderer in his big dumb book of peace, him leaving once he decides his teachings to finish, and decide to leave some type of knowledge to share it among the now peaceful clans is fine, but why did they start fighting again? The narrator just said it's been peaceful for years. Why did Syn appear? What is her plan? Why did she take 5 scrolls and turn them into 3 swords? Doesn't it make them harder to read? Why did she kill the winner of the tournament that she started? Was it to fuel a continuous war? Then why not just do that? What do these swords do? Well, now you might be thinking, that's what their arcade mode endings are for. And yes and no. Unlike the intro, the other story segments to the game, both prelude and endings, aren't voiced, meaning all of these scenes are up to interpretation only. And to the game's credit, they almost seem like Twisted Metal endings with the story they were trying to tell, but it still come across as kind of confusing. Some endings like Bimorphia, Heckler, Plague, Thankster, Redemptor, and Vanguard, who might have the best ending in the game, are examples of stories that are actually good. According to PlayStation Museum Postmortem, the team believed that they nailed the environmental and character designs, and we're inclined to agree. The arenas are indeed varied in the looks department, and features a lot of interactive elements such as spikes, lava streams, and poisonous pools, with each of these arenas doing a fairly good job of being a home stage for its respective fighter. Speaking of the fighters, despite the world and the character designs leaning a bit more into the generic Dungeons & Dragons stereotypes, such as an elven warrior princess, forest sprites, zombies, abominations, and knights in shining armor, it would be safe to assume that these designs will be more on the bland side. Maybe. But to us, we like a lot of them, especially the absolute unit, literally concentrated testosterone in the helmet, Redemptor. which might be one of the sweatiest and coolest names for a fighting game character we've encountered in quite some time.
The music of Cardinal Syn is pretty sick, and we feel this is the closest aspect the game actually got to touching the coattails of Soul Edge. Not saying that it's better, but knowing what they were going for, you can definitely feel the energy with some of these tracks. Take the tragic Morphia, a victim of multiple horrific experiments at the hands of Syn, who just wanted to see what would happen if you combine a male and a female together. You know, for fun. The moaning of the other experiments and the sounds of rattling chains really sell the almost desperate feeling this track has. Take a listen. Let's hear the theme of our boy Redemptor, who is part of this clan who believes that the only true way to peace is to mercilessly kill anyone who they deem are evil. And the music associated with him really does a convincing job at telling you that this guy who we all know is crazy views these actions as heroic. And the bombastic organs backing up the track really fits a zealot like him. Okay, one more. Plague is a pretty cool character, being a witch doctor who studied the arts of rebirth and cell rejuvenation. And after being killed by invading soldiers, his research was used on his corpse, reviving him and becoming Plague. We're entirely not sure if Plague is a good or bad guy, and maybe that's the point. His grungy, hopeless sounding theme kind of breaks into a slightly hopeful feeling partway through. If there's anything that's the opposite of the much lighter, hopeful, and usually triumphant music of Soul Edge, Cardinal Syn's darker, depressing, defeatist collection of tracks would be it. I wouldn't be sitting here trying to essentially music study these with no clue on what that even is, if I didn't enjoy the soundtrack as much as I did.
Cardinal Syn is a pretty shallow game. Characters have a couple of special moves, which are just various combo strings in which they only have 2 or 3. These features attacks as the occasional combo finish ending with a pop-up or hard knockdown. Also, from our lab, and no character has something like a generic pop-up in their moveset, with most of the launching attacks becoming available after the second or third hit. And this is an issue because there is no natural combos in this game, which means until someone's guard meter is gone, matches will entirely consist of poking and throws. Compiling all that with the game's very strange parry mechanic and at times unresponsive controls, and matches can get pretty grueling to play pretty quickly. With all that aside, it's pretty simple stuff, especially for 1998, with juggernauts like Tekken 3 and Virtua Fighter 3 hitting the scene. Chronos must have noticed this and added in a few bells and whistles to make the moment-to-moment gameplay feel like there's more than what's actually going on. So, before getting into what we feel are more important mechanics the game has to offer, let's tackle some of the smaller, less important elements first.
Most characters have some kind of projectile available to them, but only when they have magic stocked, except for Orion and Finster, who uses a bow and boomerang respectively. For everyone else, they can find magic pickups and chests scattered around the arena. These chests can also contain damage buffs, health pickups, and bombs. We didn't really use anything outside of the passive drops, and most of the projectile attacks are the same dinky looking fireball that can be easily avoided. Some characters such as Jenny has the ability to remove the arms of the opponent for a short time for her magical attack, and that's pretty neat, but the rest you'll find operate pretty similar to one another. So it's not really worth it running around the arena to try to seek these things out, other than just staying on top of the opponent after a knockdown and going for some kind of follow-up attack. Speaking of arenas, most will usually feature some kind of hazard that can damage both fighters at any given time. And by any given time, I mean all the fucking time. They constantly get in the way of the gameplay, and you'll both be getting knocked around from these more than each other when the slightest brush of a fire JPEG causes a hard knockdown. God, Heckler Stage is so fucking unplayable. You ever been zoned by bubbles not thrown by your opponent while trying not to get motion sick from a never-ending rotating stage? No? I have. It's beyond annoying and should be left off. Cardinal Syn also features fatalities, which are implemented strangely. In order to finish them, players will have to have at least 2 or 3 round wins on the opponent and then input a series of commands in order to chop off a head or a limb. This is confusing. It almost serves like a negative comeback mechanic that rewards the winner with a faster way of ending the round. Not only that, but these attacks are also tacked on at the end of some pretty normal looking combos, so there's no real grandeur to them or satisfaction with pulling one off. Sure, the camera will hit some fancy angles in order to try to sell you the killing blow, but it just happens and then you move on. I'm sure this wouldn't shock anyone just by looking at all the footage of the game, but Cardinal Syn is kinda weird to play. Like we said earlier, the game's inspiration lies in Namco's Soul Edge, so clearly a lot of its design sensibilities rear their head here, such as characters fighting with some kind of weapon, with their various attacks being separated into horizontal and vertical swings, and the basic movement feeling very similar to other 3D fighters at the time. Why'd I say basic movement? Well, we'll get into that in a few, but let's cover one of the more overt aspects that was carried over from Soul Edge.
Counterattacking is more or less a direct translation of the guard impact mechanics from Soul Edge, and it even can be done the exact same way, by pressing back or forward plus the guard button. This will cause the user to repel a swing and leaving the opponent open for a counterattack. Now, Cardinal Syn does have several unique takes on this. Players deciding to use a counterattack back option will knock the opponent away a good distance, and this might slam them into a nearby wall or hazard causing damage. Otherwise, if they don't run into anything during this action, no damage will be taken. Counterattacks can also be done from a crouching position to defend against lower attacks, but only the forward version will be available during this time. One of the more standout parts about Syn's take on guard impact is the fact that it can be done out of head stun, which is interesting because that means each attack can't be blindly mashed out, and players will have to constantly weigh the attacks they input. That's a pretty cool concept if it's done intentionally. The issue is that it's kind of overpowered. As stated before, combo strings don't naturally combo, not even with your quickest attacks, meaning that there's always a gap for a counter or a guard to take advantage of, which means matches just devolve into single poke, slowly chipping away at health bars until someone's caught lacking with the additional attack of a string. All this doesn't help with the overall slow speed of the game. Counterattacks are also inconsistent to boot. A character will perform a counterattack only to have nothing happen, and they look kinda dirt just standing there. We're unsure why this even happens, but it could be because of the very little active frames the move have. The thing is though, that the pose the character entered while counterattacking will still count as a guard. So is the move just not triggering? I guess the world will never know. Although returning to that developer insight, it's revealed Kronos at least knew this mechanic was very clunky.
Throws in Cardinal Syn take the form of these cute little universal shoves instead of the hyper unique animations that are usually found in other fighters. Pressing a direction while throwing will allow them to be aimed, and this can be used to knock the opponent into hazards or even off the wall, which actually leaves enough hit stun for a free hollow mix-up. But since the game doesn't have anything like single launching mids, it isn't anything to worry about. So be prepared to be shocked to learn that throws are still entirely broken. Throws are infinite on non-damageable walls. What do I mean? Well, if you manage to back your enemy into a wall that does nothing, usually one that shows some kind of slope, and start to throw them, it can be looped indefinitely from our research. There's just enough stun animation from the action to easily follow up with another throw. Now, they don't do damage, but it can be used to time scum on a life lead, but that's only part of why throws are utterly broken. To get to the second reason, we have to discuss, in our opinion, the most broken feature of this fighting game.
The roam button. This button allows characters to move in 3D space way faster than normal, and it is again extremely overpowered. Using it just makes it okay for characters to disengage effortlessly if there's little to no counterplay, as all the attacks are too slow to deal with the quicker movement it creates. There is technically no way of preventing someone from sitting on a life lead unless they get caught on a wall or snagged by some level geometry. Plus, everyone seems to be at the same speed while roaming, and that really doesn't help when trying to catch an opponent who's running away. Roaming will be the way to grab all those useless power-ups, which honestly makes the game feel like a really early arena fighter rather than a traditional 3D one. Okay, so circling back to throws, this is when they come back into play. Combining them with roam is utterly broken, because you can link together throws and carry the opponent across the screen. There is very little the opponent can actually do to prevent this outside of hoping for some type of missed timing, and that won't happen because it's stupidly easy to do. Using roam makes this possible on damaging walls now, which turns into a legit 100% damaging series of looping throws. Roaming really just feels like a tacked on gimmick more than a meaningful part of his gameplay. It would play a lot better without it. Not too much better, mind you, but definitely a lot less broken. We could be in the wrong here, but we feel as if it was a super late addition to the game, and we actually have a working theory going. Initially, we believe this was an attempt to emulate Soul Calibur's series-defining 8-way run movement system, but that might not have been the case, since Syn's earliest release was in the United Kingdom a month before Caliber, with the US version following almost the same time after. So this actually might be some type of coincidence. I mean, the two games are close enough that they might have heard wind of Soul Calibur's innovative take on 3D movement and decided to add it in that way. And I wouldn't be shocked to hear if that was the case. Once again, looking at PlayStation Museum post-mortem, they openly admitted that they were tweaking things like controls very late into development, so this also could mean that other elements such as the movement was being worked on as well. Just a theory.
So with everything said and done, does the final entry in Chronos' infamous trilogy of terror even deserve to fall into the same crowd as the likes of Criticom? No, we don't think so. At worst, the gameplay is just aggressively mediocre and underdeveloped. There isn't anything here that was going to turn anyone away from Soul Edge, Caliber, Virtua Fighter, Tekken, or even Fighting Lair. It might actually be better than this janky pair, Kensei Sacred Fist, but I don't think that's much of a hurdle to jump. So yeah, Cardinal Syn isn't too impressive, but that's definitely not from a lack of trying. It feels Chronos Digital actually tried to learn from their past failures and deliver on a good game here, and sometimes things just don't work out. That's just the way she goes. But it isn't all gloom and doom, however. There's a lot to like here. Most of it will come from its presentation, but a good point is still just that. And look man, I know Criticom is stinky, but I always felt that people were a bit too rough on it, with everyone being way too caught up in the fact that the game was bad to remember that it was not only their first fighting game, but the short-lived studio's first game ever. And Cardinal Syn, while not good, isn't entirely dookie, even with the massive problems with the gameplay, which shows a lot of growth. Besides, they eventually brought one of my favorite gaming series, Fear Effect, into existence, and that gave them something to rest their head on before shuffling away from this mortal coil, which proves you can't make an omelet without stiffly breaking a few eggs. We'll see you next time on the Runback. Ever since its inception way back in 1996, Pokémon has had a chokehold on popular culture, and that hold has never really loosened. This can be a good or bad thing depending on how much brainwashing the IP has done to you over the years. Being the highest grossing media franchise in the world, it's no stranger to merch. From normal things like the TCG, rugs, clocks, stuffed animals, and action figures, to stranger things that I thought was totally something else at first glance. And since Pokemon's original medium is video games, the series obviously extended past simple monster collecting RPGs once the franchise begun to take off. From battle simulators, puzzle games, roguelikes, pinball, more traditional styled RPGs, MOBAs, whatever Hey You Pikachu was, and that random Dynasty Warriors collab game. But out of all the genres the series adapted, the one that surprisingly really ventures into is the fighting genre. With a series that centers primarily around capturing and fighting various kinds of monsters, you'd think the opportunity to create a fighter around the subject would come up more often. But no, out of 130 games, the only one that does this was Bamco's Pokken, that released way back in 2015 for arcades, 2016 for the Wii U, and an enhanced port for the Switch in 2017. And from what I can remember from our time with it, the game was really good, offering a unique take on the genre by combining both an arena fighter with a more traditional one, and for what it was worth, it worked. But I feel like most people, including ourselves, would have rather taken a game that focused mainly on being just an arena fighter or a traditional one. Nothing against Pokken. Once again, that game didn't have any right to be as good as it was. But we personally would have loved to see a fighting game that was a little less busy based around the series. Other than that one standalone, there's also the various Pokemon included over the Super Smash Bros. Line of games, but that's it. So just like everything else in the world of gaming, leave it to the indie developers to pick up the slack when there's untapped potential in need of mining. And today, on the Runback, we'll be looking at two such games that attempt to tackle this apparent big brain concept for the Pokemon series. And yeah, as far as we know, there's only two, but it's one more than the official games, so take that, I guess. This is Team Crossbody, and this is our look at both Pokemon Type Wild and Pokemon Close Combat. Pokemon Type Wild was a Japanese-created fan game released somewhere in the late 2000s, maybe around 2007 or 8, because I remember seeing this game being talked about here and there while in high school. The game was developed by Poke Show, and the name Type Wild was actually taken from the 5th ending theme of the Japanese version of the original series. Speaking of the original series, you might have noticed that the art style of the game looks very similar to how the cartoon looked around that time. And that's because it was made along with the former animators from the anime. But I don't believe there was ever any confirmation of this, so we're going to slap a big old allegedly on that little piece of trivia. Type Wild put several fan favorite Pokemon in Swilot up against each other. Unlike our later topic, Close Combat, development of this game just kinda stopped from our research, without any real reason why. One would think that this could be due to the usual Nintendo and our Game Freak cease and desist monkey shines, but shockingly enough, they seemingly to have nothing to do with it. So I suppose it could be chalked up to just loss of interest. Whatever the case was, this game was a real time capsule and took us back to a simpler time using our Windows XP, the best operating system there ever was by the way, to learn and download fan games like this for the first time. Although through the making of this video being the first time we actually played Type Wild, I do remember watching videos on it on early YouTube, and being very impressed with the visuals. The claim that former show animators worked on the game is seriously believable because the animation and sprite work is well above most fan games we see up to that point. And though I personally still feel that a couple of the animations are a little clunky and stiff in some areas, the amount of love and attention to detail that went into making these sprites cannot be ignored. Plus, it's a beta version of a long incomplete game. So I suppose I should just shut the hell up.
Type Wild seriously feels like an officially licensed game that was released on a PS1 or something. It is heavily drenched in the show's atmosphere, being littered with fan service of both the playable characters and the background elements. I just can't stress enough how these sprites feel like the artist had the model sheets right in front of them. Well, I don't know about Swalot. They took some creative liberties there. Jesus fucking Christ. Speaking of fan service, the devs really like Gardevoir. Like, while searching for this game, I saw her in various outfits that included like a slutty nurse one. I mean, I'm not judging her, but who finds this hot? Alright, we should probably just get to the gameplay now before things get too weird. Just remember, this game is hella old, and info about this game is super limited from our research. So we're just going to broad stroke the mechanics here, which means we might miss a few things. But who the fuck cares? This game is over like 20 years old. It's a 20-year-old fan game that was never finished. Watch us find out if this game has some far off hidden community of players somewhere. Pokemon type Wild is fairly straightforward. Each poke plays uniquely from one another with once again pretty no-throw archetypes. Blaziken, Kabushkin, and Lucario all share the Shoto style. Gardevoir and Breloom are both dedicated zoners. Snorlax is the big boy brawler that uses the armor to cover for his lack of speed. Lopunny is the highly mobile Pixie, Gengar is a Shriekster that applies debuffs, and Swalot is the weirdo who uses unorthodox movesets to do something. I swear, we are not picking on Swalot. It may not look like it at first glance, but this game is actually an assist-based fighter. At the beginning of every round, each Pokemon will have the choice of selecting one of 3 predetermined assists associated with the character. Each assist has a star next to them. Now, we don't know what the stars mean specifically, but our guess is that it determines the strength of any given one and the rate at which it was charged after selecting them. Players are also given the option to forgo a partner for an additional 100 PP, the game's super meter. If an assist is selected, it will passively build during the match, and once the meter is maxed, they can be used. Once a new round starts, the same assist cannot be selected twice in a row. Given that this game predates Pokemon by a number of years, and that it also features an assist-based fighting system, I wonder if Type Wild inspired Pokken to some extent. Nah, probably not. It's a Pokemon fighting game, and the whole point is to include as much of them as possible. So this seemed like the more logical and easy way to include more of them without having to fill it up with tiny weaker stage evolutions. Another important mechanic is the special button, that when pressed on its own will have the Pokemon use the protect skill. Your character will put up a protective barrier that will quickly drain your PP at 1 point per frame. And while it's up, you'll be able to block every attack except for throws. Protect also works like an Instaguard option that can be cancelled out by moving in any direction, so it might be great for punishing attacks that are usually safe. It is way slower than normal Garden, so it has to be used deliberately. This game doesn't have a trainer mode or frame data anywhere to be found, but it seemed like it's safe enough guess to make. Much like the core games, Pokemon can be debuffed through status conditions. The ones that make it appear as Hair and Type Wild are Sleep, Burn, and Poison. In case of the latter two, inputting down back special will result in refresh skill for 50 points of the PP meter and will cure your Pokemon of their status. Lastly, the game has a parry or just defend mechanic. By timing your normal guard against any attack, which only seemed to net you a paltry 2 PP, even though the screen freezes for a short time and it doesn't provide you with any advantages like reduced block stun or anything. Maybe if the game was developed further, it could have helped you build assist meter or something. Pokemon Type Wild is a really cool demo. I'm just wondering what happened that stopped development, because it makes a really strong first impression through its visuals alone, but then you throw in some solidly designed gameplay on top of it and I don't know.
Such wasted potential.
Close Combat was released for download in February 2023 and was developed by Battle Capacity, which happens to be the name of an early fighting game they created that focused more on the fan-made Pokemon from Smogon's created Pokemon metagame instead of the canon characters found in Close Combat. If you so happen not to know who Smogon is, it's a group dedicated to creating comprehensive guides on competitive Pokemon battling, offering resources such as optimal movesets, team building, and even dictating various character tiers to try to rank Pokemon to several groups based off their perceived power and usage in competitive play. These tiers decide which Pokemon can be used in various metagames, and that not one Pokemon is too strong to enter that tier. Anyway, back to Close Combat. This is what they would consider a beginner-friendly fighting game, which we're talking about professionally made fighting games, quickly translates to hand-holding system mechanics, diminished character identities, lack of gameplay expression and depth, dependence on guessing to lower the skill gap, or in WB's case with MK1, Scam City. But when it comes down to this, however, I don't know, simpler controls. Yeah, that's about it. I don't really see what makes this game beginner friendly besides that, because the game doubled down on things that's supposedly annoying. Archetypes like Zoner, featuring like 4 of them, while mixing up different sub-archetypes within them, such as Phalanx being a puppet character and Pyrorath being a mix-up. 5 Zoners if you kinda count Chestnut, who was like an area denial space control kinda deal. Speaking of the roster, I want to give the game points on that side. It's not just for the different gameplay styles it provides, but for the kind of Pokemon they choose, of which, if I'm understanding right, are mostly done by public polls. Close Combat has a distinction of having a roster comprised of entirely fighting type Pokemon, and while having a good amount of popular characters, doesn't fill the casual picks like Machoke, Gallade, and Fernape, or the king of furries, Lucario. It has some of the little fringe guys like Poliwrath, Chestnut, Flannel, Scrafty, and Metachamp. And seeing a Pokemon fighting game having some of these weirdos we usually have in our teams from various games makes me happy, you know? We were really impressed with how many different gameplay styles paired well with a chosen monster. We got some pretty obvious ones like Beware acting as a grappler, or Blaziken being a Shoto, or even Primate being Rushdown. And don't get us wrong, these are appropriate gameplay styles for them, but they're pretty boring. Chestnut is defensive by nature, using his massive body and long limbs to keep opponents at bay, forcing them to make mistakes so it can punish opponents. Having one of the highest health values in the game, Chestnut is designed to wait out the timer, but it can still go on the offensive by tossing a berry to his partner Chespin, allowing him the ability to throw a fireball that can pass their opponents, or if blocked, can lead to some solid pressure due to how plus it is. Of course, being the big back, you would have to deal with slower buttons and movement speeds, but this is a solid design that focuses on patient play and proper risk assessment that reflects the character wonderfully.
Sticking to the theme of big boys might as well be Chestnut's opposite in Great Tusk. This character relies on mix-ups to get the job done, and although its normal movement speed isn't anything to take home, once it enters the rolling stance, they're capable of steamrolling opponents by smothering them with constant mix-ups, leaving them no room to counterattack, which is a pretty rare archetype to give a big body character, and thanks to this thing just crapping damage from all angles, all you need to do is get in, which at times can be the biggest challenge. But it also has the highest health in the game, allowing it to make tons of mistakes while trying to get into its preferred range. Once again, this is a pretty cool character design that based around a much more savage version of Donphan. Out of the 1,000 Pokemon to choose from now, there's no character more fitting for the item-based archetype than Scrafty. Being a hoodlum Pokemon, Scrafty doesn't fight fair and smuggling in items to use during the fight, from anti-airs, projectiles, and traps. It also uses Hitchman Scragglies to do some of the dirty work during the fight as well. While not the most original design, it certainly fits the character. Let's take a look at one more fighter. In Pokemon, a major part of the series lies in training your monsters to grow strong enough to evolve into more powerful forms. And this element shockingly makes a transition into close combat through the Scuffle Pokemon, Tyrogue. Now, I already know what you're thinking. Who the fuck is Tyrogue? Well, it's one of the original 8 baby Pokemon from Gen 2, Gold and Silver. You do remember Gold and Silver, don't you? Those are the games that everyone ignores the main region of Johto and just talks about the post-game revisit to the creepily empty Kanto and its equally creepily underpowered gym leaders. Anyway, Tyrogue's gimmick is that it had the ability to evolve into 3 different Pokemon, depending on its stats, and this gimmick is mimicked pretty faithfully here. When the match begins, players will take control of Tyrogue, who is a pretty weak character compared to the rest of the roster when it comes to damage and health. But by doing specific special moves to raise its punch and kick gauges, Tyrogue upon entering the second round will transform into one of 3 Pokemon. Hitmonchan if the punch meter is higher than the kick by 3 points, Hitmonlee if the opposite, and Hitmontop if both gauges are close enough in number. If it fails to manage to fill those gauges by at least 3 before the next round, then it won't evolve at all. If Tyrogue manages to hang on long enough to gain 3 stocks of meter, then it could force its evolution on the spot without having to wait until the next round. But if you're that good with a bare Tyrogue, then you might as well keep playing with it anyway by canceling the evolution by pressing B. Now I say that because Tyrogue may intentionally be the weakest character in the game, but weakest doesn't exactly translate into being bad, because it has its own complete toolkit for doing what it needs to do, and that's to get in and rush that ass down. Once Tyrogue gets in, it can be an absolute mixed machine with its pretty solid speed, normals, and special moves. It doesn't do a ton of damage, so you're encouraged to be as scummy as possible in order to keep your turn going and to fill that gauge up where you want it to be. It's an uphill battle, effectively starting the match at a deficit, but Tyrogue is a fun design on its own that spending time in that form isn't entirely irritating to play. Obviously, the evolutions are all very powerful and specialize in specific areas, and it's very cool having what is essentially a walking matchup chart, with the only trade-off being playing one round as a kinda weak character. At any rate, Tyrogue is a pretty damn solid design. Moving away from the gameplay for a second, I really enjoy the visuals. All the characters have this rough, almost sketch-like appearance that I initially thought was because the game was still in development. And that may be the case, but over our time with the game, it really started to vibe with me. I like the art style a lot. I don't know if anyone else made this comparison, but the way the characters look heavily remind me of those Pokemon Rubier videos made by Manny Burrito. The music is really good. Most of these tracks go insanely hard, which is a little awkward to hear in a Pokemon focused game at first, but it grew on me pretty fast. Plus it makes sense given that it's a fighting game at all. Here's a couple of our favorites.
I suppose we should discuss how the game is played now. Close Combat is a 3-button game. These buttons govern the normal and special attacks as well as the parry and throw button. There are 3 additional buttons as well, but these are mostly used for training options and extra colors for your character. Outside of normal, special moves, and supers, all characters have access to universal mechanic. Most of these mechanics evolve around the game's stock meter system. Meter in Close Combat isn't built in the usual wage or spec from a traditional fighter, such as landing and receiving damage, but instead is earned by meeting specific conditions. Each character has a maximum of 3 bars that can be used for hyper attacks, C-dashes, supers, and bursts. Meter can be gained during the following: hitting the opponent with a sweep, landing a normal grab, landing a successful parry counter, guard breaking the opponent. You either have bar or you don't. I suppose this would add to the beginner friendly nature of the game, as players don't have to worry about things such as how much meter does this combo earn me, or have to make decisions between either meter gain, combo damage, or screen positions. I also like how meter is awarded. It actively requires and or forces players to engage with the match, meaning there isn't really any downtime during matches because there's no real incentive to do something like sitting back and throwing fireballs. And that's mostly because of a
parry system. By pressing C, your character will enter a special posture that will counter attacks thrown at them during the active frames. Once the parry is triggered, players will have a couple of options on what to do next. If no button is pressed, then the parry counter will happen, automatically sending an attack in front of the parrier, rather if the opponent is there to receive the attack or not. If the counter blow does hit, the opponent would be knocked away for some pretty low damage, but parry counter's damage depends on the character using it. If the opponent is not in range, it will obviously whiff, but since the attack carries a good amount of the vulnerability frames, you'll be able to avoid instant retaliation. Although that doesn't mean your opponent just can't sit there and wait till it's finished and then punish. Pressing forward after triggering the counter will perform a C-dash forward, allowing you to close a distance on fireball throwing characters or ones with longer range pokes. This is only invincible during the startup of the animation, so if you're closer to the opponent when you're using it, make sure you have a punish ready. Pressing back will perform a C-dash back, and that will make your character do a backdash upon parrying to refresh their endurance. Performing the parry will cost them endurance, and it's refunded if the attempt is successful. It also comes out on a 4th frame, meaning that it loses to all melee attacks from the opponent. Take note, Street Fighter 6. And parry doesn't stay active for very long, so mistiming one and getting hit will result in a counter hit state.
The subject of endurance came up several times while we were talking about parrying, so let's get into that next. This meter, I suppose it could be compared to something of a guard meter, but you can also lose it while entering a state of counter hit as well. Not every attack reduces endurance on block, but most do overall. Parrying, as said before, consumes endurance as well. The meter can be recovered through a couple of methods. By using a burst, C-dash back, using 2 hypermeter, grabbing a grounded opponent, and scoring a knockdown. All of these are guaranteed to replenish your endurance, but how effective and recovered depends on your character's E and D stat. If you do run out of endurance while blocking, characters will enter a state called guard break.
Guard breaking leaves their character extremely vulnerable as they're put into a stun animation for about 66 frames, leaving them open for an attack. Endurance will reset after the animation is finished or a knockdown. There's a couple of oddities that take place during a guard break. Sweeping an opponent immediately after the state occurs will not net the user meter. Guard broken opponents cannot be grabbed. And if at 0 endurance, blocking moves that don't do damage to the meter will not cause a guard break. Attacks that deal damage to the meter must be used, even at 0, to cause a guard break. One mechanic we weren't privy to until after the making of this video was the burst mechanic, which is this game's get off me tool. It knocks away the aggressor about 3/4 of the screen while replenishing your endurance. Personally, now that I know about the burst, I don't really think it's needed as pressure doesn't really last that long. But we aren't good at the game, so maybe it really is useful.
Any game worth its salt needs some type of cancel system, and in the case of close combat, it's the C cancel. During certain attacks, you can spend 2 stocks in order to leave the lag from your previous move. Although it costs 2 stocks to perform, it will immediately refund 1 stock after. Pressing back will give you a C-dash back, which as stated before will refresh your endurance meter. Any other direction will result in a C-dash forward, which can be used to follow up with additional attacks. Normals aren't the only thing that can be C-canceled. Throws can be too if your character is allowed to do it. It can also be done unblocked. C-canceling is a pretty versatile mechanic. I enjoy that it can be used defensively as well as offensively. I also like that the meter is gained through doing more particular actions than just traditionally building it. That makes it feel like I actually have to value the option of using it, as the other uses for the meter are just as important. And if the opponent is playing particularly well, you can go the entire match without gaining any meter at all. And I think that level of meter management is extremely fun. The mechanics of close combat are really well designed, and does an excellent job of weaving in and out of one another. Doing one thing usually affects something else. Once again, I would like to reiterate that I think the way the meter is gained really adds to the game. It makes gaining meter feel way more important than if it was just given to you. Parry is fun to use as well, and I think it's a great way to keep archetypes like zoning and space controlling characters strong while giving close range fighters something to do when dealing with these attacks from a distance. Yeah, I can sit back and chuck fireballs all day, but they'll end up feeding my opponent's meter, in which they can use to get in far easier. So it ends up encouraging the zoners to mix up their tactics every once in a while to not let that happen. It's a nice little system that keeps both players interacting with the match, while not having to truly sacrifice elements of a fighter that some might find fun over others, in the case like so many modern fighting games. Our time with these 2 fan fighting games was a pleasant one. Difficult time for carving them aside. It was neat seeing the past and future of the concept of a more traditional take on a Pokemon fighting game. Type WoW is an awesome time capsule of both fan games and the Pokemon series itself, with amazingly anime accurate character sprites that absolutely hold up, and fan service to a period of the series of which we grew up. And speaking of still holding up, the gameplay, although justifiably undercooked, is still really solid to play, which really ends up staying all that harder because we didn't see the fully realized version. Close Combat is amazing for its charming hand-drew sprites and surprisingly sick soundtrack, to its actually well thought out mechanics that does a great job of being easy for beginners while having the complete fighting game experience for those hardcore to the genre, while still being fun. It's an excellent example of a fighting game having its cake and eating it too. A lesson that these multi-billion-dollar companies need to figure out with their fighting games, and is still being updated, with the devs being deeply entrenched with the community in terms of communication and feedback, and will continue to grow and be awesome. So after playing these 2 great games, I don't know why Pokken is the only fighting game the IP can muster after all these years. Maybe if Nintendo, Game Freak, or whoever stopped trying to shut down every attempt from the fans to pay tribute and show their love to the IP they created, it could be noticed that there's a little bit of demand for something like this. If they don't care about the gameplay, then the idea of a never-ending stream of DLC characters to expand the roster over years should have at least got their attention by now. Maybe we're missing something. To anyone who has a reason or a theory to why there's not a whole lot of Pokemon-based fighting games, feel free to tell us in the comment section.
With that, Season 2 of the Runback is finished. We'd like to thank everyone who watched up to this point, and to the new people finding our channel through this video. How about clicking on the card above to watch the entire season maybe? Well, whether you do or don't, we here at TCB appreciate you checking out this video nonetheless. And we'll see you next season on the Runback.
Tell me again, why are we in a vampire ghetto after sunset?
Be patient. Wait. Watch.
Come on!
This is the one we've been watching.
Man, our little credit things is over?
We have no use for a vampire in our ranks. This is a waste of
this intro's a lot longer than I remember.
Fewer weaknesses she must feed.
Alright, let's speed this up a bit for retention's sake.
Where is he, bitch?
Pretty neat, huh? This absolute ball of glorious 2000s edge stepped in leather underwear is Rain. And that's the first thing she ever says in a titular series. Does this count as titular? I don't know if our first name is Blood, but stick around, we might have the answer for you later in the video. Would you look at that, engagement and storytelling. See, your boys here at TCB can play the YouTube game too. So here we go again, talking about another beat 'em up from the early to mid 2000s. We did something similar last year with Namco's Tekken spin-off Death by Degrees. But if we just limit this to games associated with only fighting games, then these little diversions away from them wouldn't last too long. Let's say what we have real quick, right from the top of my head. There's Death by Degrees, Virtual Quest, Final Fight Streetwise, Cannon Spike, and MK Mythologies and Silent Monks. I'm sure there's more, and two of those we don't even want to play. But you know, we'll get to them eventually. So anyway, back to BloodRayne. The game, not the character, was released in 2002, and we were young at the time, so we didn't get a chance to play the game until our mid to late teens. But BloodRayne, the character, not the game, shot up to relative popularity in a short time, so at least we knew about the character. I don't think she was ever as popular as Lara Croft, but she was liked enough to be the first video game character to appear in Playboy magazine. And I mean, can you blame them? Look at her. This was peak sexy character design in the 2000s. You can't get away with this design nowadays. Well, I guess if you made her uglier, more unlikable, and give her a dick. Before we start talking about the actual game, I feel we should go over what even is BloodRayne's deal within the story itself, because if I can recall, the game might not even bring it up into the sequels. There's this consistent rule that if any hot woman decides to dress the way BloodRayne does, and it isn't because she's some kind of princess prisoner or for a Halloween costume, then she must be suffering from some kind of daddy issues. And not to be sexist or anything, but yeah, she does. They're called stereotypes for a reason, alright? Her father and main antagonist of BloodRayne 2, Kagan, murdered her mother when she was young. That's why she was hunting down those two vampires at the beginning to try to get clues on his location. She didn't get the answers she wanted, but instead found a necklace left by two members of the Brimstone Society that ultimately used it as an invitation for BloodRayne to join after debating whether or not they should let a damn pair join their ranks. The Brimstone Society is a secret organization that protects the world against supernatural threats. So think the Bureau of Paranormal Research and Defense from the Hellboy series, or the Watcher's Council from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I always found it strange that Kagan wasn't the driving antagonist for this game like he is for BloodRayne 2 or Betrayal. That always felt awkward to me and always made BloodRayne 1 kind of stick out to me compared to the other two games, like the odd one out. Curious, I took a quick peek at the game's manual to see if I could find any additional information. Nope. I did find something more important though. The manual straight up refers to BloodRayne, the character, not the game, as well, BloodRayne. Which, you know, I was going to make a bit throughout the video about, but now that it's canon, I don't even want to anymore. So I guess I'll just call her Rain like everyone else does in the game. There goes that reoccurring joke that probably would never gotten old. With all that completely necessary exposition out of the way, we can now finally concentrate on the more important stuff, like the actual exposition of this game.
Newspapers claim the people of Morton, Louisiana are turning into some type of monster. They're calling them mutates. Doctors think a new disease is the cause, so they quarantined the area.
You make me proud.
I'm glad she isn't all. Who are you? Well, this little lady dressed in the equally fatherless costume is Mice. Mince? I think it's pronounced Mince. And she's another damp pair sent from the Brimstone Society to help assist Rain on her first mission. Which begs the question, why was that one guy in the opening cutscene so against supernatural beings like Rain joining their organization? Because with the way he was acting, it made it sound like she was the first of that kind they were recruiting. Judging by the way she carries herself, Mince seems to be a good deal older than Rain. It might be her superior within Brimstone itself of her handling the training and all. So that would mean that she got on board before Rain's consideration. That dude must have not liked redheads or something. Anyway, back on task. Rain's mission is to explore the town and destroy these biological masses that could be the cause of the mutate outbreak. Along the way, the girls enter a nearby church where there was some kind of last stand, and Mike suggests Rain should pick up some weapons. At the beginning of the video, I mentioned these Runback specials would be covering beat-em-ups, but to be absolutely fair, BloodRayne is more of a hack and slash. You see, this is still pretty early in 3D gaming, so things like controls and terminologies weren't really set in stone yet. A little genre-defining game called Devil May Cry released a year before BloodRayne, and although that is still widely considered a hack and slash, it is the first of what would be molded into what would be called the modern day character action game. I don't know, talking about genres get a little blurry for certain subjects. So the combat of BloodRayne isn't very complex, and it will usually just involve you running into your target with your little arm blades and smashing the attacking button until something dies. And yeah, that gets pretty monotonous. Fast. Like you'll be sick of it by the end of the first act of the game fast. But this is where the weapons come in, right? To spice things up? And they do, I guess. Rain auto-locks while you're blasting away, and they do a good amount of damage. She even does that strange thing some games tried to do around this time with her firing at two different enemies at the same time. I don't know if it works or not because it looks, you know, glitchy. Rain can switch between melee and gunplay on the fly, and that's pretty fun to do when paired with the dismemberment and destruction physics, which might be due to the Inferno engine that the splash screens proudly shows.
You make me proud.
After all the fighting, they find a huge wall with some exposition stamped on it.
After our dark year in 1873, the first stone of this great wall of fortitude was laid. With this plaque mounted in the...
You know, Mince's voice is hot and all, but I'm assuming reading wasn't her greatest subject.
May this wall of
Mince, I finished reading, Rain finished reading. It's only 3 sentences. Read faster, bitch!
Seems like they built that wall for nothing.
She's a sharp cookie. Now make a timely joke about all this disease and wall talk. So Rain makes her way further into town when she spots one of these spider-like creatures that goes down easy after a couple of hits or a good shotgun blast. And after a little bit of that, she finally finds one of those biomasses Mince was talking about, which turns out to be a nest that those spider things are spawning from. Your current damage output isn't enough with the rate the nest pumps out those things. So your typical spaz fighting that's been working up to this point isn't going to cut it because you'll be easily overrun. So now's as good as time as any to talk about Rayne's V-Trigger, Blood Rage ability. Damage increases and you'll gain some new looking combo attacks while it's popped. It's still the same mashing as something though. Also, everything will slow down while Rayne speeds up because 2002. Rayne and Mints meet back up. We learned that those spider creatures are taking humans, eating and regurgitating them to feed something. I guess we'll figure that out later. The girls meet a survivor who calls those spiders, here we go, the Moraisrak?
The Moraisrak, swamp monster. That's what the Creole call the creatures.
I want to keep calling them giant spiders. You guys hear my accent? I don't have any business trying to pronounce gambit talk. Speaking of these little gambits, Rayne will gain the additional objective of finding any healthy ones and pointing them back to this location for safety. Before the two separate again, Mints will give Rayne another important tool, the harpoon, which can be used to pull stuff in from a distance. Wait, if she's just getting that harpoon now, then what the hell was she using to grab that guy from the intro movie? You know, there's too many questions coming from that one cutscene, man. Now that we got our marching orders, Rayne has to investigate through these flooded houses in order to find more nests and survivors. Water's a pretty big hazard in these early areas because for some reason in folklore, vampires are weak to it. But since Rayne's a half-breed, it doesn't bother her as much. That may bring up the question of vampiric hygiene, but I'm sure there's some dumb shit answer like they don't have sweat glands or something, so I'll drop it here. There's a lot of fighting in ankle-deep water on this level, and that slowly chips away at your health, but I don't see how water is even damaging her. She's wearing, and excuse my lack of slutty fashion sense here, but she's wearing like leather thigh-high heels? Those are essentially waders, there's no water getting in there. We meet another gambit named Kazi, who just instantly starts dumping exposition onto Rayne. Kazi says that this bitch, her words not mine, Maraza, this voodoo priestess, hooked up with this German guy and did some black magic which caused the mess here in little old Morton. She wants to raise the mother of the underworld. That's all the information I could gather because of that weirdly distraction picture of a guy with a wiffle ball bat, which might be the first recorded case of a picture chewing scenery. Moving on, there's lots of fighting and nest busting here with not much else happening. We meet Deputy Goram and grab some weapons in the town hall, explore this McMansion needing to grab a battery to do some more nest busting and annoying water, and spin kick a switch in order to drain the water at a power plant in order to do, guess what? More nest busting and annoying water. I don't think BloodRayne puts his best foot forward in his opening act with it being pretty repetitive. We should go complain. What's Mints doing? There she is, just standing there. You know, we all had supervisors like this who say they had more important things to do and would actually just be there doing nothing. Go patrol around or something. Oh. This might come off as cold, but I don't even feel bad. We just caught Mints slacking off on the clock. And this might have not happened if she wasn't too preoccupied doing the spinning slut cam thing while staring at 2000s era frog AI. Then again, Rayne just kinda sat there and let it happen. That's fair. Mints was my supervisor, however. Let's just split it in the middle and say there's mistakes made on both sides here. Rayne decides to follow the spiders to wherever they're feeding, and this leads her to the source of that voodoo ritual and the titular queen of the underworld. Now I know what you're thinking, but this isn't the same as the BloodRayne thing. See, she's the name of the level. This is a pretty simple fight, and by that I mean you handle it just like anything else. Use Blood Rage and smash the attack button until you run out. Then attack her babies until you can pop Rage again. If you head on to some power weapons, then that can help wiggle her health down too. Rayne examines the queen's corpse and finds some kind of glowing rib. She pulls it out and it suddenly stabs her. Rayne falls on the ground in pain. After some time, that German guy whose name is Wolf appears and rips it out of Rayne and leaves her for dead. Huh. I forgot BloodRayne was about Nazis.
Tell me your lovely, honey.
Before we get to our favorite part of the video, seeing how long we can repeat the word Nazi before YouTube nukes our channel, let's talk about probably one of the most interesting things to come out of this series, and that's with Rayne's voice.
Sort of sticking a finger in my eye doesn't mean I have to do it. Seems like they built that wall for nothing. Easy with that thing. And who'd you call ugly? As good as it gets. Is there no dry land anymore? No one left. Damn it. time to put an end to this. I'll find those bastards and rip their legs off one by one.
That sultry voice comes from Laura Bailey. You might remember her from like everything. While not entirely new to the world of voice acting by the time BloodRayne came around, her resume was pretty small, lending her voice to several animes from the Dragon Ball series to Yu Yu Hakusho to whatever the hell Blue Ginger was. Voicing Rain was her first role for a video game, and she does a really good job. I wouldn't know how a vampire should sound other than a stereotypical blah blah I want to drink your blood type of thing, but the voice clearly fits and that's fine by me. Bailey had to be around 21 when she got the part, and Rain is 18 in the original BloodRayne, so the age gap isn't too far to make all this 2002 Edge Girl talk feel believable. What doesn't feel very believable, and I might be the odd one out here, but I feel while Bailey does give Rain a very sensual and fitting voice, there's a bit of a disconnect for me when she tries to talk all sexy. Those line reads in particular always felt a little awkward and forced, I don't know. Maybe I like my Rain better when she's just being every Michelle Rodriguez character ever. Laura described providing the voice acting for the character as a blast, although she didn't personally identify with her. Apparently during sessions the director would adjust the game script on the fly. If the dialogue was changed to be just nasty enough to get her to blush, then it was usually kept. But this wasn't anything new. Getting Laura Bailey to say things to get her to blush was a typical pastime in the early 2000s. I even tried to release a board game version of it at one point. I pitched the idea to both Hasbro and Mattel, but they didn't want anything to do with it. And although Laura was small enough for me to reach at the time, she didn't want to read the crap ton of lines I made for the game. She also wanted money. I offered to pay her an exposure, but she wasn't hearing any of it. I know she didn't want to admit it at the time, but it was too late. She was already spoiled from that Blue Ginger money. She also said something about not wanting to get in the business with a 10-year-old. Whatever, her loss. That was a nice little break, wasn't it? Alright, let's get into some old Nazi shit. If the first act of the game was a mixture between Blade, a bug exterminator, and tits, then the second act is more of a combination of Blade, Wolfenstein, that strange looking grandma thing for SpongeBob, and tits. I know you guys are confused at the moment, but don't worry, that's normal. Just stick with me and it'll all make sense soon. 5 years after Rain's unfortunate fisting from the local swamp German guy Wolf, she's back on the horse, and that's good for her. I can't explain to you guys the amount of women who just quits after a good fisting. This is a very good lesson for all the little girls who somehow played this game without their parents knowing in 2002. So instead of just babbling on about what Rain's next assignment is, I'm gonna let the game do the talking here, because I am a sucker for a good briefing scene. It could be a side effect, the condition, not the Matt Hardy move, of playing so much Siphon Filter as a kid.
Did you get the file?
In my hands.
Our sources tell us that all of these targets are in one place right now. A huge sub-bay and mining facility on the coast of Argentina. We heard rumors the Nazis are closing in on a lost relic with immense powers. We need more information. We're sending you to South America. Find out what you can about this relic and report back to us.
How do I contact you?
Use the Nazis' communication center.
Understood.
One more thing. The Nazis have organized a special task force called the GGG, or Gegengeist Group.
Anti-ghost group?
Literally, yes. The GGG was established to experiment in the occult. Anything that could help Hitler succeed. Their leader and founder is Jürgen Wolf. The file you have lists many GGG officers and their SS conspirators, including Jürgen Wolf. You are to eliminate all of these targets to prevent further supernatural ambitions. But be careful. Members of the GGG have been experimentally enhanced and are particularly dangerous. Good luck. And Rain, watch yourself.
I hope you got all that, because we're already in Argentina, and Rain somehow got into the only opening of a heavily guarded fortress that's built to the side of a mountain. She also gains the delayed perception, a vampire trick I guess she picked up over those unseen 5 years. That reminds me, we talked about Rain's Blood Rage power-ups, but never went over the various other power-ups she gets throughout the game. And I'm not talking about those arbitrary additions to her basic or BloodRayne attack strings. Sadly, most of them don't get much use because the dominant strategy of saving your meter and cashing out on the Blood Rage never really goes out of style. But I thought I should mention it since she does get a couple of these abilities during this section of the game. Starting with the method of slowing down time without popping BloodRayne being the most useful of them. Because once again, it's 2002 and we really want to show off that we could do the max paying thing too. In final boosting section, he said that the combat got pretty dull by the end of the Louisiana section, and he's not wrong, it did, but that's just because the devs put Rain up against pretty boring enemies. You'd hit them, they'll vaguely thrash in your direction to hit you, it got old fast. Starting here though, the combat picks up. I'm not saying these Nazis are any smarter than the spiders or the mutates, but at least they're a lot more active in the fight, running around and being fairly decent shots if you slow down for whatever reason. They strike a good balance between still being weak enough to make Rain feel powerful, but still being a threat. If you take them too lightly, they will gang up on you and they will burst you down. That's enough incentive to keep you on your toes at least. The game also does a fairly solid job at throwing new enemy types at you. Most of them are just basic Nazis with different weapons, but you'll get some curveballs like the elite Nazis, who took the extra effort to learn how to block, which result in them needing to be weakened before taking any decent damage, or engaging from the back from the start. It isn't much admittedly, but the mixing of these guys keep your brain at least a little active, which makes combat a bit more stimulating. So the Nazis are at least a bit more fun to fight than the spiders. And I get it. I heard the awkwardness of that sentence the moment I said it, but if phrases like that is why I love video games. Sometime later, Rain bashes her way to some kind of rec room, shocking several Nazis and the target on the list. He does this. Which I guess he was grabbing a gun or something, but then he pulls out a knife. I don't know, it just seemed like a waste of energy when you just seen this tiny ass girl kick down a whole door. But whatever, do you. If you didn't piece things together by now, the setup to Act 2 is very similar to the first, with the hit list targets being the new biomass nest you need to hunt down. Of course, it's a lot more interesting with these guys actually being able to fight back and all. The game will also vary up these targets, so not just these locker punching dudes. Hey look, another target. But the Nazi pulls the old take out the battery trick to slow us down. Unluckily for them, we've been through this before, so now we have to track down the guy who took it. We of course do that and head down the elevator and eliminate another GGG officer. After a little more running and gunning, Rain encounters her next target in Von Blunt. They exchange some words, and similar to other characters we met in this game so far, he just start expositioning after Rain asks about the relic. Why? You have to know she'd been busting up this place by now. Why tell her important information? I don't care if you think you're about to kill her, take that knowledge to the grave then. Either I don't know anything about Nazi etiquette, or this game gets a little contrived with what the characters like to tell Rain at times. So according to the High Priest, the lost city of Atlantis was full of Aryans and then it was lost, something it tends to do. During the destruction of the city, its immortal leader Balar body was scattered. The Gingengeist group located Balar's skull deep underground, and that's why they're all the way out here in Argentina. I don't know what to say to all that. Rain doesn't buy it and neither do I. We all know that Atlantis was the home of an advanced humanoid civilization that settled on Earth a million years ago, and for some reason was made of pulsating flesh. Blue doesn't take kindly to our version of the story, and he reveals this stupid looking armored pulpit that houses a heavy firearm, and the boss fight begins. The boss fight is also kinda stupid with butt fire at you while officers swarm the chapel. The objective of the fight is to get behind him, and deal enough damage so you can hit his little button and drive his pulpit down the track to avoid your offense. Rain can naturally outrun his machine gun fire, so just get behind him, slow down time, and well on the priest until the job gets done. It's a dumb boss fight for a vampire to be subjected to, but Rain was apparently riled up enough to learn her rage attack. It consumes bloodlust, so you won't be using that anyway. Rain makes her way to the communication stack and relay her findings to Brimstone, and then she's told to destroy it to prevent enemy reinforcements. She does so and continue on her mission to eliminate targets. Fighting her way to the dock, she finds and kills another target. and another who tries to ambush her with bazookas. This interaction happens and it got a bit of a chuckle out of me.
Tell me you love me, honey.
More checking names off the list until we get a key for a locked door. There's an announcement about something funky happening at the science lab. We do this to a couple of Nazis.
What are you doing?
What does it look like? I'm lowering the lift.
Turn it off! I can't! Stop the lift, please! You can't do this!
You really should pay more attention to safety. As you know, most accidents in the workplace can be prevented.
Rain, they're dead. Who are you quipping to? You know what? I get it. Sometimes they're just for you. Our entire channel is built on that. One of the targets takes off with Rain not too far behind. Now that there's a little bit of quiet time, I like to take the time to appreciate everyone who made it this far in the video. If you did, sound off with the phrase, Bailey blushes badly in the comment section. YouTube loves basic bitch engagement like that, and we're not only doing this to push this video out further, but also gauge interest with that board game I'm trying to push. I was thinking of starting a Kickstarter and holy shit, back to work. Where did all the Nazis go? The only character who could clear a room of those guys this fast is Captain America. Jesus, Cap is fucking those guys up. He's fast too, I didn't even see him leave the room. Oh, Cap's not in there, is he? So whatever happened at the science lab got out of control, and now we gotta fight a bunch of Red Skulls. I'd say if they were any tougher than usual, but like everything else in this game, the Trident troops bass fight and does a trick. With all the Nazi shooting and jibbing everywhere, BloodRayne feels like a boomer shooter at times. And I suppose that would make sense seeing how the game timeline-wise will be more closer to those games. I'm not complaining or anything, it definitely adds to the charm. Man, Act 2 is much more fun than stinky Borno, Louisiana. Sorry if you're a watcher of this and you're from there, I didn't make the rules. Terminal Reality did, so go Saints. We're in the barracks now, and despite having his whole head replaced with whatever that is, and definitely 100% ceasing to be alive in some form, we still have to go around finding and dropping all these GGG members. When without a body, those SpongeBob grandma things, oh yeah, that's right. These are what I was referring to earlier. These red head things just kind of charge at you, but they don't take many hits to die, so they aren't that annoying. So Rain watches another target on her list called the Butcheress doing her thing, dropping prisoners down what I can only describe as a death pit. Then Rain says possibly the second best line in the game.
That big blonde bitch is one of my targets. I wish I could get to her now.
That's just chef's kiss. I don't usually resort to Zoomer talk because I enjoy not sounding like an idiot, but I think they would say that the writers were cooking with that line. For real, that shit was bussin'. No cap, on God. I'll stop now. On the way to her location, things get infinitely more skibbity when a bunch of Deadamites bust through the door and begin to chase Rain. She tries to barricade herself in some boxes and stands there like it's going to hold. Come on, shorty, they just knocked down a steel door. I'm finished with the Zoomer talk, I swear. There's an admittedly pretty cool chase scene with the Deadamites flooding the area. This would have been easily a QuickTime event. This game came out like 4 years later. The scene does get a bit dumb when Rain sees a picture of Wolf conveniently hung up in the featureless hallway. It has a quick flashback to when Wolf gave her the fist. In a costume he definitely wasn't wearing. Either they forgot what he was wearing or this is from an earlier build. It gets kinda confusing after that. When Rain returns, she's getting teed off all my Datamites until one of them shoots a grenade launcher and she suddenly dodges it. There's some explosions and now the pathway is being blocked by machine gun nests. I see what they were going for and the execution could have been a lot better, but once again, there's a charm to all this in-aging jank to these scenes. Similarly to the Butcheress kicking a guy and he slowly steps off the ledge to sell it. Things like that are just too cute to be critical or even snarky about. And if I'm being honest, I kinda miss when things is like this. It just feels so innocent, you know? But enough being the nostalgia tired. We got some machine gunners to handle. Rayne's gonna need a weapon that can shoot around corners. She doesn't have to look very far. The guy who had the grenades is running two past the giant grinders. We put him through one of the smaller ones and go back down and grab him. Well, that was easy. Oh shit. As we get deeper into the mountain compound, Rayne enters a laboratory where we see some of the remaining Nazis are trying to fight off the other increasing dynamites. You would think there would be some kind of alignment system at play here or something, but then I remember, if that was the case, then you only have two choices, and that would be to reawaken the ancient evil and Nazis. But then again, I am playing as a vampire, and it's not like those guys are usually depicted as good guys. Luckily, all I have to do is kill everything that moves. Eventually, Rayne runs into another target on her list, the Commando. Another good line to sit here.
You must be the mysterious Commando. I'm sorry, was I talking too fast? Can't keep the words apart? I'll talk slower. Read my lips. You're dead. Any last words?
Despite having Kevlar covering his body from head to toe, the dominant strategy remains just that. First off, save some of his backup for health later, because he might be able to wear you down with his hit and run tactics. They'll be busy fighting off some dynamites that are appear anyway. Find where he's hiding on the map and proceed to wail on him. He fights just like the elite Nazis and will block if you attack in front of him. After a while, he'll throw a flash grenade to relocate. Do this for about 5 minutes and you're done. Before exiting the area, we'll meet yet another body on the list, and he'll start to provide Rayne with more exposition about the dynamites. At least this is a little better than Blood, who was just talking to Rayne while she was in span distance of him. This guy's about to gas her behind a reel for his glass and fucking whoops. Never mind. Rayne gets her wish and finally gets her hands on the butchers. After a very tasteful detailing of what dynamites do to a host, the butcheress reveals that she plans to turn them loose on the United States. Please don't. We can't survive another quarantine. This is another stupid boss fight. Just two morons spaz fighting at each other until something gives. After another charmingly jank cutscene, the butcheress seemingly meets the same end as our very own men that she subjected to the dynamites. If not that, the fall killed her. And if it wasn't the fall, surely it was the fire. Once everything cools down, Rayne jumps in the death pit herself. Where we almost get bodied by some unusually strong dynamites, enter the morgue and jump into what I can only describe as a body disposal chute. We exit out of the chute and make our way to the mines. Hold up, is that Sephiroth? Did the Nazis get the Sephiroth? Rayne fights our way through a mining facility when we meet an old friend. BloodRayne's equivalent to block puzzles to find a missing battery gimmick. In the lower section of the facility, these guys make themselves known, so you know we're about to get somewhere good. These are Daemite warriors, and seeing these Doom 64 mother demon looking motherfuckers mean that we're getting closer to the temple that hold Beliar's skull. That's right, we took a trip to the wiki for you guys. Warriors are complete damage sponges, and unless you're packing some heavier weapons, it's best just to pop blood rage and deal with them quickly. Deeper in, then the Daemites are getting the upper hand. Nazis are seen spraying and praying, shooting directly at their own guys, who just ignore it because it's a 2002 game. The mine officer decides to abandon his own men and blow up the pathway to seal the tunnel. Then they run off after seeing Rayne leave the elevator. Rayne lets them go for the meantime because she has to deal with the blocked off tunnel. She'll need some explosives and a detonator to get the job done. You think you're clever, BloodRayne? But I see right through you. This is just another goddamn battery puzzle, isn't it? We break through a wall to see the same Nazis who ran from us earlier. I think. They reuse the same models. Well, if it is those guys, they being overran by Daemites. And we lend a hand by taking care of another target on the list. We also grab the detonator from them and the dynamite a little ways further, then return to the passage and blow it clear. We finally made it into the temple, and now we have to make our way to the core. This opening area for the temple line of levels might be my favorite combat areas in the game. This place has a lot of nook and crannies enemies can hide, but it also has tons of verticality that will have you jumping, attacking, and dodging all over the place. There is a ton of fighting here, and I know we've talked a lot of trash about the combat being simple and repetitive, but it's that same simplicity that makes the fighting actually fun. I said this a little while ago, but the game usually strikes a good balance between making Rain feel like a powerful force while providing just enough enemies to keep you engaged, keep you on your feet, at least in the second half of the game. And that's not to say the game is difficult or anything. I say it stays relatively on the easy side of things, and maybe it could have used a bit more variety in the basic enemies. And while Rain can take a good amount of damage, she isn't a tank, so the large number of hit scanners will always ensure two things. One, that you're taking some kind of damage, and two, that you're staying mobile. Since any target can become a health pickup at any time, nothing feels cheap. BloodRayne is at its best when you're attacking in large groups of enemies at once. That's where the game shines, and that's why I usually make fun of the 1v1s the game first you'll in for boss fights, because it usually reveals just how shallow the combat actually is. But I guess the fighting's grown on me a lot more than past playthroughs, so take the good and the bad. Whoa, careful with that pacing, BloodRayne, or I might start thinking you're a well-designed game or something. So after all that fighting in the previous section, this area feels a bit more like a breather with some light combat and platforming. After Rain makes our way down, we partake in a oldie but a goodie, fighting a high health enemy in a shallow pool of water. We make our way back up only to be greeted by a boss fight against 3 Daymite Guardians. Now I know what you're thinking, Madhouse, surely this would be a difficult fight, right? Typically yes. 3 of these guys would be a challenge. I just wish Blood Rage wasn't so damn overpowered. Seems like a contradiction. After all, I just got finished praising the combat. But the devs will always make sure this is the first and final solution to any issue of this game. And admittedly, it's getting a little annoying. But then again, I'll let it slide since the game was designed in this way. It is not some type of exploited oversight. Hey yo, this is Rain, and I'm in the Daymite Chamber. Daymite Chamber. See, sometimes it's okay to make jokes just for you. This is largely a platforming area where you'll tightrope walk until you finally get to what the Nazis were searching for, Beliar's Eye. And just like the rib she found in Louisiana, this also attracts itself to Rain. Since we don't have any old Germans who remove this one, Rain just kinda gets better after a while and gains the Extruded View ability, which grants her the gift of zooming in and out while in first person mode. At this point, Daymites begin to flood the area, and the Nazis had enough, now wanting to blow up the temple. And for once, we agree. I don't want to make friends with them or anything, we just simply kill them and take their day as our own, pushing the driller into the core of the temple and destroying it. We have to get out of this minor area before everything blows up, so we make our way. The fuck? Okay, so as soon as you go off the path, you instantly die, fair enough. Much like the running from the Daymite section from earlier, this would have been a cutscene or a QTE if the game would have came out 3 or 4 years later. And this might be a little hack take, but I actually like playing moments like this out. It's simple, but at least you're playing a moment, and that's far more immersive than just having to press several buttons or just watching it. The last boss of the Argentina section is Mauler, one of the final members of the GGG. I don't know what to say about this design. I'm halfway expecting him to yell out, "Nazi science is the greatest science in the world!" So Von Neck braids hair informs Rain that Ballard was the original devil, and held his spot until Mephisto fell from heaven and usurped him. When it was found out that Belair couldn't be destroyed, he was ripped apart and scattered. Rain's newly obtained eye isn't the only relic, with his heart being located in Germany. I'm not sure how they wanted you to handle Mauler. You could just use Blood Rage and take off more than half of his health. But I think the devs intended players to lure him to the supports of the upper platform and have it collapse on him after baiting him to attack. I just used Blood Rage, then I shot at him a lot, then I used Blood Rage again. He's a sponge, but the fight shouldn't take that long. Rain hitches a rod on the departing sub while stowing away in the box, and we leave Argentina. We're rounding the home stretch now, and after an admittedly cool cutscene, the final act of the game takes place in Germany at Castle Gestadt, which is a location from one of Terminal Reality's earlier games called Nocturne, a 1999 survival horror that BloodRayne is heavily influenced by. Actually, BloodRayne's working title during development was Nocturne 2. BloodRayne also makes several references to Nocturne throughout, and that would explain Mince's strange half-sister comment at the beginning of it. Apparently this character, Svetlana Lepetsky,
a character from the Nocturne game, is our half-sister. When the game was going by Nocturne 2, Svetlana was the main character. But when Nocturne's publisher went under, Terminal Reality opted to change the game, as they weren't willing to share the Nocturne license with a new publisher that they didn't trust yet. So Svetlana became Rain, and here we are. I meant to mention this all at the start of the video, but I forgot, okay? But let me get out of the way. It's briefing time.
Asselgestadt, a place where nightmares are born. Vampires have called this place home for centuries. But now the Germans have put up an eviction notice. They've made some progress, but the creatures they're up against are monsters even amongst vampires. An ancient breed of vampire cut off from the world, where in isolation they evolved into perfect killers. Daylight is fading fast, and with it, any advantage the Nazis might have had. I have a new target list from the Brimstone Society, and an official objective to stop Wolf. Wolf already has Beliar's teeth, ribs, a hand, and an eye. Now he's after the Black Heart, hidden somewhere in this castle. He wants to wake Beliar in himself. Beliar, a demon, a devil, maybe even the devil. Wolf can't control this kind of power. If Beliar is woken, we're all in big trouble. Wolf, remember 5 years ago in Louisiana? You almost killed me. I intend to pay you back. With interest.
Papers. Let me see your papers. Danke. Drive through.
Thanks for the ride, bucko.
So time to get into some more old Nazi shit, but this time they can fly. Act 3 is a lot like Act 2 in that we have to continue knocking off a list of bad guys. We have to fight our way to the entrance of the castle, and along the way we start picking names off said list. We're given a fairly sizable area to wander around and take out more names on the list. Before we get our first one, he's picked off by one of these feral vampires, who are like Rain but more man-bat than Batman. These guys aren't too complex to fight. Although they hit pretty hard, just keep circling around them because they'll dive at you most of the time. We make our way indoors where several Nazis are fighting the feral vampires, and while we're busy, one of them rips through our target, which is pretty damn cool. I didn't think that was going to happen. Rain sees that Nazis are making mecha now and has the same reaction I would have.
Oh yeah, what are those? I want one.
Get off me, stop!
Why isn't it in media that Nazis always have access to all the cool stuff? BloodRayne suddenly turns into Mech Assault for a little while as we deal with these big mobile armor units. And wow, this thing is slow. Let's just speed this up for retention's sake. For how cool it is to be controlling this mech, shooting at 3 of these guys is going to take a while. So we'll do some more speeding up here too. The leader joins in not too soon after and the boss fight begins. Except nothing really changes from what we've been doing before, except he'll beg for mercy when he's down to about 25% life. After that, we do some more fighting with the mech before blowing it up and proceeding onward. This story feels a little straightforward so far. I mean, we're just killing Nazis for the most part. We need some kind of third act twist to spice things up. What's Mintz doing? Wait, Mintz? Is that her? I think it's her. The fatherless costume seems familiar, but the Nazi hat has me baffled. We eventually confront Mintz on her betrayal, but she doesn't give Rain any answers as a boss fight starts. You know how these work by now. Mintz gets ate alive by blood rage as he awkwardly rushes up the stairs to get to her cue. Look, I know it was said that it's hard to make fun of all the jank of the game, but this is just stupid. Why didn't they just put the fight on top of the flight of stairs instead of watching her glitch around while I beat her up? The fight's second phase starts as soon as she goes through the door, and that involves polishing the remainder of her health that she wasted getting up here. After she harpoons the wall only to fall after saying goodbye, giving us a path forward. The boss fight was shitty, but that scene was worth it. We go about our merry way when we meet back up with the target that was taken from us earlier, being killed by what seems like the leader of the feral vampires called Hedrox. He runs off and Rain confirms the kill. I don't really like the fact that we need to do even more hit list stuff for the final section of the game. It feels kind of tacked on and used as an excuse to have you run around this castle and do stuff without the game actually telling you to do something more meaningful. Rain crashes through a windmill and meets Hedrox the Infinite, who is also after Beliar's heart to become the ultimate immortal. Whatever that is. This feels like a strange motivation to have when you have the title The Infinite in your name, but what do I know? By the sound of their conversation, they know each other, which I thought was a reference to Nocturne. The game likes to do that from time to time, even if it confuses people, but it's not. Hedrox killing the castle's owner, Count Voku, is one though, and that kinda makes me mad. Anyway, Hedrox has two other similar versions of himself, and they take turns talking in this role-like fashion, and sometimes it goes into this whisper that's admittedly a little creepy.
Relic's not unlike the one in you, Rain. Hedrox wants the secret. Tell Hedrox. How does Hedrox put the relic in the body?
Sure. You have to cut your heart out and replace it with Beliar's.
Do not think Hedrox has tried. Does Rain forget? Hedrox is infinite! Hedrox wants the secret. Hedrox will tell Rain's eye and eat her mind to find it.
Hedrox, I'm gonna do the same thing to you that you did to Voku.
I like him. I don't like those distracting nipple rings he and the other feral vampires have, but the actual guy is okay. Obviously, this leads to a boss fight against them. Fighting Hedrox directly isn't going to work because he has the word infinite in his name, so instead we have to aim for the supports on the windmill to bring it down to the waters below. Of course, one of the Hedroxes catches wise of Rain's plan and stays out of danger. Rain tries to goad him to a second round, but he runs with her in pursuit. The next level will have Rain make her way past some landmines that you could just platform through, so I don't know what the point even was. There will be several Nazis up ahead with bazookas that you will need to kill in order to get some ammo to fight off a mech, but you can just ignore it all the same. Crossing the bridge, Rain will meet Jurgen Wolf. He'll light the bridge on fire and speed past Rain while giving her a fiery bitch slap. The fire will set off the charges on the bridge and Rain will have to fight her way to the other side. We find another target on our list, but he's friendly fired to death. What the fuck is this? Okay, so now we have to fight experimental former conjoined twins who were separated at birth. As a twin, this fight is essentially blackface with them finishing each other's sentences and even both dying after killing just one. Huh? The boss fight? What do you think happened? It's revealed that Mintz is alive again. Turns out that Mintz here is a double agent against the Nazis ever since the mission in Louisiana. They do this "I was here the whole time" while doing this zooming Dutch angles on her face like it's this big brain plot twisting reveal. But unless I'm missing something, it's kinda dumb. She was swallowed by a spider back in Louisiana and Rain thought she was dead. The spiders weren't working for the Nazis, they felt like a byproduct of them trying to get to the titular queen of the underworld, right? The Nazis must have not known she was working for Brimstone because they gave her a little hat and everything. And it wouldn't have hurt if Rain knew that she was alive and well and going undercover as a Nazi, because it's not like she had any real issues with the GGG since getting this mission. For this to work, Mintz will have to betray Rain in the Louisiana section of the game. Maybe she's the one to remove the rib from Rain on Wolf's orders or something, but maybe she made sure Brimstone was on the scene to rescue her afterwards. Am I missing something here? Mintz can't kill Wolf in all this time because of his near invincibility with all the Beliar parts inside of him, and they can't afford him to get a hold of his heart. Before they can get any further with their plans, Wolf janks in front of them and gives Mintz a good fisting, removing her heart and killing her. Wolf leaves Rain alive because she has the eye and Hedrox currently has the heart. Wolf wants them to meet in the cathedral. Dude, why not just kill her now? You're already one shot at Mintz, who has to be stronger than Rain by just experience alone, and you want the eye. Just kill her and fight it out with Hedrox for the heart. Man, this plot is stupid. Rain says her goodbye to her mentor and rushes off to face dumb Invincible Wolf. So Rain pimps into one of the stupidest Mexican standoffs ever. Hedrox finds out the secret of getting Beliar's heart to work, and he transforms into him through the use of a loud jump scare. He attacks both Rain and Wolf. The final boss fight isn't very good. You have the options of killing either Beliar or Wolf. Each method requires a good deal of brain work. If you want Wolf dead first, just pop Blood Rage and mow him down, otherwise he'll just super speed into walls and generally just be annoying. After depleting his health, Rain will give the finishing blows to a nearly invincible Wolf before flipping them off and turning her attention to Beliar. Defeating this guy will require all of your cutting and skill. First you let the idiot get to the right size, because he'll be growing throughout the fight. He'll be laughing of course while he's doing it, but that'll stop after you kill him. Once he's big enough, he won't be able to fit through any doorways, and that gives you plenty of time to zoom in on his heart and just unload on him. If you run out of ammo while doing so, just search around for more. After that exciting fight, Beliar will be absorbed back into his heart. When the coast is clear, Rain would do this. You know, for how she dresses and talks at times, this is the most overtly sexual thing Rain has ever done in this game. I don't think jumping on guys to drink their blood really counts. And technically, this is just fixing her corset. She did just beat two near invincible beings after all, and that thing can only divide and separate for only so long. Gotta keep Lau and Eric in check. That's a Dharma and Greg joke by the by. Anybody remember that show? Seriously though, I never noticed how the game doesn't really overly sexualize Rain to any significant extent that I noticed. Sure, there's an occasional butt shot here and there, but you know, I mean, come on. It mostly tried to keep her looking as cool as possible, to the point that the story kind of suffers because she doesn't really struggle with anything. Almost like having her look sexy was enough. Huh. What do you mean you can have your cake and eat it too? Rain is seemingly enticed by the power of Beliar's heart and reaches for it, but it petrifies before it can be touched. She is then notified by Brimstone that her father was found and he must be stopped. And that's the original BloodRayne. And I know what you guys are thinking, and we'll be getting to both BloodRayne 2 and Betrayal a lot sooner than you think, but we need to get back to talking about fighting games first. But man, this game held up a lot better than I first thought. This game still looks good for a 2002 game, combat is simple but fun, with some satisfying gore physics going around, and a nice selection of guns too. The level design is a little dull, but it's mostly a mean to an end just to get back to the fighting. The only real complaint is the story. It's kinda dumb, and not in the way you think a BloodRayne story should be, whatever that could actually look like. I don't really know how to end this video. Here's a replay of Rain doing that boob thing again.
You make me proud.